only Wolverine.
One guy gets hit with a cancer diagnosis, another guy is basically made of anger, and somehow that combination is supposed to turn into a universe-saving superhero team. Or at least that is what Wade Wilson would like everyone to believe. The story opens back in 2018, when Deadpool gets his hands on Cable's time travel device and decides to use it for something extremely Deadpool. Personal career growth. He jumps out of his own timeline, Earth-10,005, 10,005, and lands in Earth-616, the sacred timeline where the Avengers exist. His goal is simple. He wants to meet Happy Hogan and convince him that he belongs on the Avengers roster. Wade gives it his best shot, trying to sell himself as hero material, but Happy is not impressed. Instead of welcoming him into the world's biggest superhero club, he turns him down. 6 years pass, and Wade's life looks completely different. The Deadpool suit has been packed away, the chaos has slowed down, and Wade now works as a used car salesman alongside Peter. And for anyone who forgot Peter from Deadpool 2, his greatest power is apparently surviving life with 2 different types of diabetes. Wade has also broken up with Vanessa, but the two remain on friendly terms. Today happens to be Wade's birthday, and all his old friends have gathered to celebrate with him. For a moment, things feel normal. Awkward, yes, but normal. Then the Time Variance Authority suddenly shows up, grabs Wade, and pulls him through a portal before he can even process what is happening. He is taken to meet Mr. Paradox, a TVA agent who seems far too pleased with himself. Paradox explains that Wade is being offered a rare opportunity. He can leave behind his messy little universe and move into the sacred timeline, the same reality where the Avengers live. To make the offer even more tempting, Paradox gives Wade a new Deadpool suit, basically dangling his dream right in front of him. But then comes the bad news. Paradox reveals that Wade's home timeline is slowly dying because its anchor being has been lost. That anchor was James Logan, Wolverine himself. In that universe, Logan sacrificed his life to save his daughter and several young mutants, and without him, the timeline has started to fall apart. Normally, Paradox says, a universe can take thousands of years to fully collapse after losing its anchor. But waiting that long is apparently too boring for him, so he has built a machine that can speed up the destruction and wipe the timeline out much faster. Now Wade has a choice. He can accept Paradox's offer, move into the sacred timeline, and maybe become the Avenger he always wanted to be. Or he can stay loyal to his own universe and die with all the people he cares about. Naturally, Wade chooses neither option. Instead, he headbutts Paradox, steals his temp pad, and opens a portal back home. Wade still believes there might be some way to find Logan alive, but when he digs up Wolverine's grave, all he finds is the skeleton left behind. Wade does not let that stop him from having a full conversation with the remains anyway, because of course he does. Before he can figure out his next move, TVA agents arrive to arrest him for interfering with the timeline. Wade responds in the most disrespectful way possible. He uses Wolverine's adamantium bones as weapons and starts fighting them off. When more agents appear, he takes Logan's claws and turns them against the TVA, slicing through the group with brutal efficiency. After escaping, Wade starts jumping across parallel universes in search of another Wolverine. His plan is simple: find a replacement Logan and use him to save his dying timeline. The first Wolverine he finds is disappointing in a very literal way, because this version is much shorter than expected. Wade keeps searching, moving from one universe to another, meeting different versions of Logan, and trying to convince them to help. Unfortunately, most of them either ignore him or try to kill him on sight. After getting beaten down again and again, Wade finally finds a Wolverine who does not immediately attack him. That is already a huge improvement. The downside is that this version is a miserable alcoholic, drowning himself in regret and bad decisions. Still, compared to every other Wolverine Wade has met, this one looks like the best option available. So Wade grabs him and drags him back to the TVA. Once there, Wade tells Paradox to simply swap this Wolverine into his timeline and use him as the new anchor being. Paradox shuts that idea down immediately, explaining that it does not work that way. Wade demands to speak with whoever is actually in charge, but that creates a problem for Paradox. He has been doing all of this behind his boss's back, and if anyone finds out, his position at the TVA could be ruined. So instead of helping, Paradox gets rid of both of them. He sends Deadpool and Wolverine to a wasteland known as the Void, a forgotten place where discarded things end up. The moment they arrive, Wolverine is furious. He realizes Wade has dragged him into another disaster, and he immediately attacks him. The fight gets ugly fast. Wade takes hit after hit, joking through the pain even while Wolverine tears into him. Just when the two are about to fully destroy each other, Wade breaks the fourth wall and casually throws in a shameless channel-style plug before unloading his pistols into Wolverine's chest. Wolverine answers by stabbing him with his adamantium claws. The fight continues, with Wade's swords ending up stuck in Logan's body and Logan landing several brutal blows in return. Right before Wolverine can finish him, Wade manages to talk him down. He tells Logan that they both need to get back to the TVA. If they can do that, Wade might save his own universe, and Wolverine may still have a chance to fix whatever broken past made him so angry in the first place. Wade suggests that no one carries that much rage unless something truly painful happened to them. Their argument is interrupted when a familiar-looking hero appears. At first, Wade assumes he is looking at Captain America and gets embarrassingly excited to meet one of his favorite heroes. But the man is not Captain America at all. He is Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four. That excitement does not last long. Enemies begin closing in, including Pyro. Johnny tries to show off by unleashing his flames, but Pyro absorbs the fire instead, draining Johnny's power and making him completely useless in the fight. Wade and Logan instantly act like they have no connection to him, pretending they do not know the guy. As the attackers move in, Wade pulls his swords out of Wolverine's body and prepares for what looks like a massive battle, but it is not nearly as dramatic as expected. Wolverine handles the fight quickly and brutally, proving that even this broken version of Logan is still extremely dangerous. Pyro realizes he cannot take them head-on, so he uses a massive magnet to trap them. Wolverine gets pulled in by his metal skeleton, Wade gets caught in the middle, and Johnny is captured along with them. The three are thrown into a cage and taken to meet the person who controls this part of the void. Cassandra Nova, the twin sister of Charles Xavier. During the ride, Johnny makes the mistake of saying several insulting things about Cassandra, or at least, that is what Wade claims the moment they meet her. Without hesitation, Wade tells Cassandra every terrible thing Johnny supposedly said, throwing him directly under the bus. Cassandra responds by demonstrating just how terrifying she is. She uses Johnny as an example, proving that her power is not something anyone should take lightly. After that, she explains her own history. She was sent to the void before she was even old enough to walk, and according to her, her brother Charles never came looking for her. Wolverine tries to attack her, but Cassandra stops him effortlessly, forcing him down into the ground as if he weighs nothing. Then she turns her attention to Wade. She pushes into his mind, searching through his pain and insecurities, and discovers how deeply his breakup with Vanessa still hurts him. Wade tries to hide behind jokes, but Cassandra sees right through him. When she pulls herself out of his mind, Wade uses humor to distract her just long enough for Wolverine to strike. Logan drives his claws into her, and for a second, it looks like they may have actually caught her off guard. But Cassandra is far more powerful than either of them expected, and their attack is not enough to stop her. Cassandra does not seem worried at all. Instead, she calls out for Alioth, casually mentioning that the creature is probably hungry. That is enough warning for Deadpool and Wolverine. The two waste no time and escape using the flying device before Cassandra can properly finish them off. After crash landing away from her base, their main goal is still the same. They need to find a way back to the TVA. But before continuing, they stop inside a nearby abandoned restaurant to catch their breath. The place is empty, dusty, and half-dead, which honestly fits their mood perfectly. While they rest, Deadpool tells Wolverine that back in his own world, people absolutely love him. He is not just some random mutant there. He is a legend, the fan-favorite hero everyone remembers. This Wolverine does not take that as a compliment. He tells Wade that in his world, things are very different. People do not love him there. In fact, most of them hate him because he has made too many mistakes, and some of those mistakes cannot be undone. After the short break, the two continue walking toward the border. Before Johnny died, he told them that the border was the only possible way out of this place, so that becomes their next destination. As they move through the wasteland, Wade explains what happened to the Wolverine from his universe. He tells Logan that his version died while trying to save his daughter and a group of mutant kids, giving his life for people who needed him. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when a strange-looking dog runs toward them. Wade instantly falls in love with the little creature. This is Dogpool, and Deadpool reacts like he has just discovered the greatest living being in the multiverse. Unfortunately for him, Dogpool already belongs to someone else. A different version of Deadpool soon appears, introducing himself as Nicepool. And yes, somehow that is his actual name. Marvel really looked at that and said, perfect. Wade and Logan ask Nicepool how to reach the border, and instead of causing trouble, Nicepool actually helps them. He gives them his car so they can travel faster. Soon, Deadpool and Wolverine are driving across the void, finally making some real progress. During the ride, Wade asks Logan a serious question. If they manage to fix his world, what is the first thing he would change? Wolverine immediately hits the brakes. That one word, if, catches his attention. He realizes Wade may not actually know how to fix anything. Logan asks him if he has been lying this whole time just to get his help. Wade admits the truth. He does not really have a complete plan. He only knows that his friends are in danger, and he has to save them somehow. Wolverine does not take that well. He calls Wade a joke and says it makes perfect sense that the Avengers and the X-Men never wanted him. Logan says he has been alive for over 200 years, and in all that time, he has never met anyone more pathetic or useless than Wade Wilson. And just like that, the road trip turns into a full-blown disaster. The two start fighting inside the car, and they do not stop for hours. They punch, stab, slash, and throw each other around in every possible position, destroying the vehicle from the inside out. By the end of it, the car is completely wrecked, blood is everywhere, and both of them are too exhausted to keep going. Eventually, they pass out. The next morning, a stranger approaches the ruined car, calmly takes it, and drives away like this is just another normal day in the void. When Wade wakes up, he sees Wolverine sitting nearby, drinking whiskey like nothing happened. Then Wade hears someone approaching and gets ready for another fight, but before he can react properly, he is thrown to the ground by Elektra. She is not alone. Blade appears next, followed by Gambit, and then the young woman who found them and brought them to safety reveals herself as Laura. In her universe, Wolverine was her father. Wade asks how all of them ended up in this place, and Elektra explains what happened. Their universes were reset, and the TVA threw them into the void because they knew these heroes would never quietly accept the destruction of their worlds. They were basically discarded because they refused to stop fighting. Then they reveal that Johnny Storm was their friend. This creates a very uncomfortable moment, because Wolverine, drunk and brutally honest, tells them Johnny died because of Deadpool. Wade immediately denies it, acting shocked that anyone would accuse him of such a thing. He insists Johnny was like a brother to him, even though they barely knew each other, and Wade absolutely threw him under the bus in front of Cassandra. Somehow, despite all of this, Wade manages to convince the group to help him and Logan fight Cassandra. He explains that the only way to defeat her is by blocking her psychic abilities, and Magneto's helmet would have been perfect for that. Unfortunately, the others tell him Cassandra destroyed Magneto's helmet after killing him, but there is still one possible option. Juggernaut's helmet can also block Cassandra's powers. The problem is that Juggernaut works for her, which means they will have to steal it directly from one of her strongest allies. Deadpool gives the group his usual messy motivational speech, and somehow gets almost everyone on board. Elektra agrees, Blade agrees, Gambit agrees, Laura is ready too. The only person who refuses is Wolverine. Logan wants nothing to do with the mission, the team, or Wade's desperate plan. That night, Logan sits alone, drinking in silence. Laura approaches him and says he reminds her of her father. Even with all his anger and damage, she still sees something familiar in him. She tells him that her Wolverine had flaws too, but that never stopped him from being a hero when it mattered. Logan does not accept that easily. He tells her he is not a hero. Then he finally opens up about what happened in his world. His team needed him, but he was not there. He was drunk in a bar, and by the time he came stumbling back, it was already too late. Everyone was dead. Since then, he has carried that guilt like a wound that never closes. He has never forgiven himself for failing the people who trusted him. Laura listens and then tells him not to repeat the same mistake. She asks him to stand with them tomorrow, because this time, he still has a chance to show up before it is too late. When morning comes, the team heads toward Cassandra's hideout. As they approach the entrance, Blade pulls out a bazooka and blasts the gates open, giving them the loudest possible arrival. Everyone moves in ready for war, and this time, Wolverine is with them. Laura's words clearly reached him, and his decision gives the others more confidence. The battle begins almost immediately. Cassandra's forces attack from every side, and the team splits into action. Blade, Elektra, Gambit, and Laura hold the enemies back, giving Deadpool and Wolverine the opening they need to reach Cassandra directly. Cassandra is not surprised for long. When Deadpool and Wolverine confront her again, she quickly reminds them how dangerous she really is. She freezes Wade in place without even touching him, showing that his healing factor does not matter much when he cannot move. Then she turns her attention to Logan and enters his mind. Inside Wolverine's memories, Cassandra sees the pain he has been carrying. She discovers the truth behind his guilt. Humans attacked the mansion and killed his friends. Logan arrived too late to save them, and after that, rage took over. He started hunting and killing humans, believing revenge might give him peace, but it never did. Every act of violence only left him emptier than before. While Cassandra is distracted inside Logan's mind, Laura fights Juggernaut. She manages to defeat him and take his helmet, then climbs up toward the tower to get it to Wolverine. But before she can hand it over, she is pulled down. With no other choice, she throws the backpack containing the helmet. At the same time, Cassandra becomes emotional while digging through Logan's memories. That moment gives Deadpool the opening he needs. He grabs the helmet and forces it onto Cassandra's head, instantly cutting off her powers. For the first time, Cassandra is vulnerable. Then Pyro appears and shoots her, taking advantage of the moment. But Wolverine knocks him out before he can finish the job. Wade is ready to let Cassandra die, but Logan stops him. He says that even though Cassandra may deserve death, Charles Xavier would never want him to be the one to kill her. For Logan, this is not about mercy alone. It is about refusing to become the same broken man he was before. So they remove the helmet and spare her life. Cassandra, surprisingly, decides to repay them. As thanks for not killing her, she agrees to send them home. She uses a sling ring she stole from one of the Doctor Strange variants and opens a portal to Earth-10,005, Wade's universe. Before they leave, she warns them that Alioth is coming, the monstrous cloud-like creature from Loki that devours everything in its path. With no time left to argue, Deadpool and Wolverine jump through the portal, leaving the void behind and returning to Wade's world. While their temporary team is still battling Cassandra's army back in the void, Cassandra turns her attention to Pyro and asks the obvious question, why did he try to kill her? Pyro finally reveals the truth. He was never truly loyal to Cassandra. He has been working for Paradox all along, and his real job was to eliminate her when the right moment came. Back at the TVA, Paradox finds out that Deadpool and Wolverine have returned to Washington, and he immediately rushes after them, hoping to take control of the situation before anyone discovers what he has been doing. But what he does not expect is Cassandra Nova-stepping through the portal right behind them. She wastes no time. Cassandra gets inside Paradox's mind and quickly uncovers his secret plan. She sees that he has built a machine designed to destroy Wade's universe, and she realizes he was planning to erase everything connected to her world as well. Cassandra throws Deadpool and Wolverine aside and digs even deeper into Paradox's thoughts. The more she sees, the more her plan changes. Instead of simply surviving, she decides to use Paradox's machine for herself. If the device can wipe out one timeline, then why stop there? Cassandra chooses to destroy every universe until only the void remains, the one place where she has power, control, and no one above her. Meanwhile, Commander B-15 notices something strange. An unauthorized time jump has been activated on Earth-10,005, Wade's timeline. She begins tracking it, realizing someone is interfering with the timeline without approval. At the same time, Cassandra captures Paradox and forces him to take her to the machine. But when she steps through the portal, she leaves it open behind her. Deadpool and Wolverine are trying to understand what just happened when Dogpool suddenly runs out of the portal. Wade instantly becomes distracted. He grabs the little dog with pure excitement, and somehow the moment turns into an extremely awkward kissing situation that makes Wolverine look like he wants to delete himself from existence. The Nicepool appears right after Dogpool, and the situation becomes even stranger. Wade and Nicepool immediately start arguing over Dogpool like two divorced parents fighting for custody. The argument is ridiculous, but before it can go anywhere, the portal opens wider and an entire army of Deadpool variants comes marching through. There are Deadpools of every kind, and honestly, some of them look cool, while others make you question who approved this in the Multiverse office. One of them at least has a mask, which feels like a blessing. Another one looks so wild that it feels like Stan Lee needs to rise from the grave just to explain what is happening. Jokes aside, the whole thing is insane in the best way. Deadpool tries to reason with them. He warns the Deadpool Corps that Cassandra is about to destroy every timeline, which means all of their universes will be erased too. But trying to give a serious warning to an army of Deadpools is basically impossible. Instead of listening, they prepare to attack. As the bullets start flying, Wade grabs Nicepool and uses him as a human shield. Nicepool, still unbelievably polite, calmly mentions that he thinks he may have been hit. That is when he reveals the worst possible information. Unlike Wade, he does not regenerate. Wolverine immediately calls Wade out because he has basically just killed Nicepool in real time. Wade refuses to accept that. He insists they can still save him because there is a donut shop nearby, and according to him, donuts always make people feel better. Wade tries to cross the street while holding Nicepool, but every time he pauses, more bullets tear into Nicepool's body. He keeps using him for cover, pretending there is still a chance, but by the time Wade finally reaches safety, Nicepool is far beyond saving. Deadpool tries to revive him anyway, while Logan watches in complete disbelief. Then Wade notices Nicepool's golden pistols and takes them for himself. And honestly, those guns look so good that Wade immediately acts like this is exactly how he wants to arrive at his own wedding. Now armed with Nicepool's golden weapons, Deadpool and Wolverine turn toward the Deadpool army and prepare for war. The fight begins, and the two start cutting through the variants one by one. Bullets, blades, claws, and chaos fill the entire street. Blind Al, listening from nearby, hears the violence outside and cannot believe what is happening. Wade and Logan tear through Deadpools in the open, then even go after the ones hiding inside a bus, clearing them out in one brutal wave. And honestly, this is one of those moments where the scene is so stylish that you just have to appreciate it. The camera slows down, the action gets sharper, and the two heroes move through the chaos like a perfect disaster. This would be the exact moment where a YouTube narrator pauses and says, "Look at this scene. Now hit the subscribe button before the next body drops." Even Babypool shows up looking strangely adorable in the middle of all the madness. But there is one major problem. Unlike Nicepool, every other Deadpool in the army can heal. So after getting shot, stabbed, sliced, and thrown around, they simply regenerate and get back up, ready to fight again. Deadpool and Wolverine realize they are about to be stuck in an endless battle. Then, out of nowhere, another figure arrives. At first it looks like one more variant is joining the fight, but it turns out to be Peter. And because apparently every Deadpool in every universe has a Peter of their own, the entire army immediately stops fighting and starts celebrating him like he is a celebrity. The Deadpool Corps completely forgets the battle and gathers around Peter with excitement. Nobody fully understands why this works, but somehow it does. Deadpool and Wolverine use the distraction to escape. While the Deadpool army is busy cheering for Peter, the duo slips away and runs toward the subway. There, they find Paradox, who tells them the worst possible news. Cassandra has already activated the machine. Deadpool and Wolverine demand to know how to stop it. Paradox explains that the device is powered by two opposite energy sources, matter and antimatter. To destroy it, they need to create a short circuit between both sources. The only way to do that is for someone to act as the connection between them, but whoever becomes that bridge will be completely burned away. Both of them understand what that means. Whoever goes in is probably not coming back. Still, Deadpool and Wolverine decide to move forward anyway, because there is no other option. The machine is already tearing through reality, and if they waste any more time, every universe could be erased. Wolverine tells Wade that he will do it alone. He says Deadpool still has people waiting for him, and he deserves to go back to his family, but Wade sees things differently. To him, Logan is the one who deserves another chance. This version of Wolverine has spent years drowning in guilt, and now he finally has an opportunity to become the hero he thought he could never be again. So Wade makes the decision for him. He suddenly attacks Wolverine with a fire extinguisher, knocks him back, and shoves him out of the chamber. Then he locks the door behind him, choosing to sacrifice himself before Logan can stop him. Inside the chamber, Wade grabs the cables from the matter source and tries to stretch himself far enough to reach the antimatter side. But even with all his effort, he cannot reach it. On the other side of the door, Wolverine refuses to let him die alone. He breaks through, enters the chamber, and grabs Wade's hand. Together, Deadpool and Wolverine use their own bodies as the bridge between matter and antimatter. The energy begins tearing through them instantly. Their bodies burn from the inside out as the power surges through them, but neither of them lets go. The pain is unbearable, and for a moment it looks like both of them are being destroyed piece by piece. But somehow their healing abilities allow them to survive long enough for the connection to work. The energy overloads the Time Ripper, creating a massive short circuit. Just before Cassandra's plan can erase the universes, the machine explodes. The destruction consumes Cassandra, meaning she can finally join Nicepool wherever the unlucky variants go. Not long after, Commander B-15 arrives and confronts Paradox. She demands to know why he activated the Time Ripper without authorization. Paradox immediately tries to save himself. He lies and claims Cassandra forced him to build the machine by invading his mind. He says that once he realized what she planned to do, he brought in Deadpool and Wolverine to help stop her. Then Paradox puts on the saddest face possible and dramatically says the heroes died saving the universe. But his performance collapses instantly when Deadpool and Wolverine walk in alive. The two expose the real story, and Paradox realizes his career is completely finished. As everyone reacts to Wolverine's return, some people in the room become a little too fascinated by Logan's body, practically drooling over him. Wade notices it too, because of course he does. But before the celebration can fully begin, Commander B-15 says she still needs to send Deadpool back to the Void for everything he has done. Luckily, Peter arrives at the perfect moment. He introduces himself as Peter Pool and explains that Deadpool belongs to this timeline. That helps Wade avoid being thrown away again. Commander B-15 then arrests Paradox for his crimes and checks the timeline. To everyone's relief, Wade's universe is no longer collapsing. It is healing. B-15 congratulates Deadpool and Wolverine for saving the universe. Wade uses the moment to ask if she can help the friends they left behind in the Void. He also asks if she can change Wolverine's past and fix the tragedy that destroyed his world. B-15 gives him a mixed answer. She says she will help save the people trapped in the Void, but she cannot change Logan's past. Everything Wolverine suffered, every mistake, every failure, and every painful memory led him to the moment where he helped save the world. Without that history, he might not have become the person who stood there today. So instead of rewriting his past, she offers him something else. He can stay in Wade's reality and build a new future here. After all the chaos, Deadpool and Wolverine finally go for a quiet meal. Wade is reunited with Dogpool, which is probably the happiest part of the entire story for him. Some days later, Deadpool and Wolverine are living together as roommates, and Blind Al seems surprisingly happy to have them around. Wade introduces Logan to all of his friends, letting him become part of the strange little family he fought so hard to protect. Wade also tries to repair things with Vanessa. He may not instantly fix everything between them, but for the first time in a long while, he is actually trying to become better instead of hiding behind jokes. And that is where the film comes to an end. Deadpool saves his timeline, Wolverine gets a second chance, and Wade's weird found family grows even bigger. Rest in peace to Johnny Storm and Nicepool, two legends who deserved better but definitely made the story unforgettable. There's something strangely funny about opening a Deadpool movie with Wade Wilson not being Deadpool. Not in the heroic sense, anyway. When we meet him here, Wade isn't slicing through bad guys, making a mess of the timeline, or throwing jokes at the camera like he's allergic to silence. He's just stuck, and honestly, that might be the most unusual place to find him. Wade Wilson, the guy who usually treats chaos like a full-time job, is now living this weirdly small, deflated life after stepping away from the superhero world. The breakup with Vanessa has clearly knocked something out of him. The movie doesn't need to sit there for 20 minutes explaining every emotional detail, because you can feel the point pretty quickly. Wade is still Wade, sure, but the spark is dimmed. He's still making jokes, still hiding behind that familiar loudmouth personality, but underneath it, there's this sense that he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be anymore. And that's a pretty smart place to begin, because Deadpool is usually at his best when the movie lets him be ridiculous while still giving him something personal to fight for. Without that emotional weight, he's just a guy in red leather saying dirty things. Funny for a while maybe, but not enough to carry an entire story. So starting him here, in this kind of washed-out ordinary life, gives the movie at least some ground before everything goes completely insane. And then there's the used car salesman angle, which is almost too perfect for Wade. It's pathetic, but in the right way, not tragic pathetic. More like, of course this is where he ended up pathetic. You look at him trying to exist in a normal job, trying to smile through this life that clearly doesn't fit him. And it's funny because Wade Wilson was never built for normal. He can pretend for a bit, he can wear the shirt, say the lines, maybe even act like he's moved on, but no one is buying it. Not the people around him, not the audience, and probably not Wade himself. What makes it more interesting is that the movie also gives him that failed Avengers moment. Wade tried to aim higher. He wanted to matter on the biggest stage possible, to be accepted into the world of real heroes, and he got rejected. That little detail actually says a lot about where his head is. Beneath all the jokes and the nonsense, Wade wants validation. He wants someone important to tell him he belongs. And when that doesn't happen, he doesn't become stronger or wiser overnight. He just shrinks back into this smaller version of himself. That feels surprisingly human for a character who spends most of his time acting like he knows he's in a movie. The birthday party scene adds another layer to it. His friends are still around. People still care about him. There is warmth there, even if Wade doesn't fully know what to do with it. And that's important, because it reminds us that his universe isn't just some abstract timeline on a TVA screen. It's his people, his messy little circle, the people who have seen him at his worst and somehow still show up. So before the movie throws him into multiverse madness, Wolverine variants, the TVA, the Void, and all the cameo chaos, it quietly establishes one simple thing: Wade has something to lose. He may act like nothing matters. He may joke through pain, rejection, heartbreak, and embarrassment. But when you strip away the costume and the blood and the fourth wall gags, this version of Wade is a guy who feels like he missed his chance to become something meaningful. And that's why this opening works better than it probably should. It doesn't reinvent Deadpool. It doesn't suddenly turn him into some deep, silent, tortured soul. That would feel wrong. But it does let him begin the story from a place of failure. Not superhero failure, not world-ending failure, personal failure. The kind where your life technically continues, but you know you're not really living it. For a movie this loud, crude, and chaotic, that's a pretty grounded starting point, because before Deadpool can save a universe, he has to admit that his own life has become painfully small. And for Wade Wilson, that might be even scarier than the end of existence. And then, just when Wade's life has become painfully small, the movie does the most Marvel thing possible. It brings in the TVA. Now, depending on how tired you are of timelines, variants, universe-ending threats, and people in offices explaining reality like it's paperwork, your reaction to this setup may vary. Because on paper, this is very much another multiverse problem. Wade gets pulled out of his normal life, dragged into this strange bureaucratic corner of existence, and suddenly he's being told that his entire timeline is basically on death row. That's a lot to throw at a guy who was just trying to survive as a used car salesman. But what makes it feel slightly more Deadpool than standard Marvel is the way the movie treats the TVA itself. It's not presented with some grand, sacred seriousness. At the center of it, we have Mr. Paradox, played with this smug little middle management energy by Matthew McFadden. He doesn't feel like some ancient cosmic god. He feels more like a frustrated office employee who has been staring at the same spreadsheet for too long and has decided, you know what, let's just delete the whole thing. And honestly, that's kind of funny. The threat itself is massive. Wade's timeline is dying. His universe, his friends, his whole little corner of existence, all of it is slowly coming apart. But the person explaining it to him has this dry, corporate, almost bored attitude, which gives the scene a weirdly comic edge. It's life and death, but with office lighting. That contrast is where the movie finds some of its personality, because in another superhero film, this could have been handled with heavy music, long speeches, and a lot of very serious faces staring at glowing screens. Here, it's more like Wade has walked into the worst HR meeting in the multiverse. He's not just being told that reality is collapsing, he's being offered a place somewhere else, almost like a transfer package. His world may be ending, but don't worry, there's another desk available. That's cruel in a very funny way, and for Wade, this becomes the real pushback into action. He could accept the escape route. He could choose the comfortable option. He could let his old life, messy as it is, disappear behind him. But that would mean admitting that the people he loves are disposable, that his world is just one more failing timeline in a system full of endless replacements. For all of Deadpool's jokes about not caring, that's the one thing he can't really do. The TVA crisis gives the movie its engine, even if the actual mechanics can feel a little shaky. Timelines dying, universe designations, erasure devices, anchor beings, some of it sounds more complicated than it emotionally needs to be. The basic idea is much simpler. Wade's world is going to be destroyed, and someone in power is treating that like an administrative inconvenience. That's the part that lands. It also gives the movie a chance to poke fun at Marvel's own obsession with multiverse logic. The TVA should make everything feel bigger, but Deadpool's presence keeps undercutting it. He's standing inside this massive cosmic system, and instead of being awed by it, he treats it like another ridiculous franchise problem he has been forced to deal with. And that attitude saves the setup from becoming too heavy. Because let's be honest, a lot of viewers are already exhausted by multiverse stakes. Once every universe can be replaced, erased, repaired, rebooted, or rewritten, the danger starts to lose weight. The movie seems to know this. It uses the TVA crisis seriously enough to motivate Wade, but not so seriously that it forgets how absurd the whole thing is. That balance is important. The threat gives Wade a reason to move. Mr. Paradox gives the story a smirking bureaucratic villain. The TVA gives the movie a gateway into all the chaos that follows. But underneath the timeline jargon, the actual emotional question is still pretty direct. When the universe tells Wade Wilson that his life no longer matters, does he accept that? Of course he doesn't. He's too stubborn, too obnoxious, and maybe, deep down, too loyal. So the TVA may arrive with all this multiverse baggage attached, but it does one useful thing right away. It turns Wade's small personal failure into a cosmic problem. His life was already falling apart quietly. Now the universe is just making it official, and that is exactly the kind of disaster Deadpool was built to ruin. The movie's whole disaster really begins with one idea. Wade's universe is dying because Logan is gone. And I'll be honest, the anchor being concept is one of those Marvel ideas that sounds both simple and slightly ridiculous at the same time. On a basic level, it works. Every timeline has someone so important that their death causes everything around them to slowly collapse. In Wade's world, that person was Wolverine. Logan dies, and the universe starts rotting from the inside. That's the explanation. Now, whether that explanation feels emotionally powerful or like another piece of multiverse paperwork depends on how patient you are with this phase of Marvel storytelling. Because yes, it gives Wade a reason to go looking for another Wolverine. It connects this movie directly to the shadow of Logan, and it makes Hugh Jackman's return feel like more than just, hey, audiences love this guy, bring him back. But at the same time, there's something very comic book messy about it. The death of Logan was already a huge emotional moment for fans. It felt final. It felt heavy. It felt like one of those rare superhero endings that actually meant something. So when this movie turns that death into a timeline problem that can maybe be fixed by grabbing another version of the same man, you can feel the tension between emotional storytelling and franchise mechanics. And the movie knows that. At least partly, Deadpool himself treats the whole thing with that usual smirking disrespect. He understands, in his own irritating way, that bringing Wolverine back after such a strong farewell is a dangerous move. You can almost feel the movie trying to have it both ways. It wants the emotional weight of Logan's death, but it also wants the thrill of Hugh Jackman walking back on screen with the claws. And honestly, that's the whole movie in miniature. It is sentimental and shameless at the same time. The anchor being idea does give the story a cleaner emotional hook than just the multiverse is in danger again. Wade isn't saving some random abstract reality, he's saving his home. His people, his friends, the little broken family that still cares about him. Logan's death becomes the crack in the wall, and Wade's refusal to accept that loss becomes the reason the movie can move forward. But it also raises a weird question. If one person's death can doom an entire universe, then what are we really dealing with here? A cosmic rule, a metaphor, a convenient excuse to build a Deadpool and Wolverine team-up? Probably all three, if we're being honest. And maybe that's why the concept feels a little shaky but still useful. It doesn't need to be perfect. This is not the kind of film where you pause and demand airtight science from the timeline department. The idea just needs to push Wade toward Wolverine and give the movie a bit of emotional pressure. On that level, it does the job. What matters more is what Logan represents. He isn't just a missing superhero. He is the symbol of a better ending, a more serious legacy, a version of Marvel storytelling that had weight and consequence. So Wade searching for replacement Logan is funny, yes, but also quietly desperate. He's not just looking for muscle. He's looking for a way to undo the feeling that everything meaningful has already ended. That's why the concept works better emotionally than logically. Because Wade Wilson, of all people, is being forced to care about consequence. He can joke about variants, timelines, and cosmic rules all day long, but the truth is sitting right there. Someone mattered so much that their absence broke a universe. And Wade, who has spent so much of his life pretending nothing matters, suddenly has to prove that his world still does. Wade's solution to a dying universe is exactly the kind of solution only Wade Wilson would come up with. His world is falling apart because Logan is dead, so naturally, he decides the answer is simple. Go find another Logan. Not a better plan, not a careful plan, not even a plan that sounds like it passed through a second thought. Just grab a Wolverine from somewhere in the multiverse, drag him back, and hope reality stops collapsing. It's stupid, desperate, and weirdly perfect for Deadpool. But the funny thing is, the Wolverine he ends up with is not some glorious replacement. He isn't the noble, mythic hero Wade probably wants him to be. He isn't standing there ready to save the day, claws out, music swelling, destiny calling his name. No, this Logan is broken. He's drunk, bitter, guilt-ridden, and clearly not interested in becoming anyone's savior. If Wade is trying to patch his universe with the strongest version of Wolverine, he somehow manages to pick the one who looks like he has already given up on himself. And that choice is what makes the pairing more interesting than just a cheap superhero team-up, because Wade doesn't recruit a legend. He recruits a man who feels like the leftover piece of a legend. That's important. The movie could have easily brought Wolverine back as a victory lap. Hugh Jackman walks in, everyone cheers, the claws come out, and the whole thing becomes a 2-hour celebration of seeing him again. And to be fair, there is definitely some of that energy here. The film knows people wanted this. It knows the audience has been waiting to see Deadpool and Wolverine properly thrown together, insulting each other, fighting each other, and making a complete mess of the screen. But by making this version of Logan so damaged, the movie gives Jackman something slightly heavier to play. He is not just grumpy in the fun comic book way. There is a real weariness to him. He carries himself like someone who has already failed badly and has no interest in being reminded of it. Wade's endless noise bounces off him at first, not because Logan is too cool for it, but because he seems exhausted by everything. By Wade, by heroism, maybe by himself. And that contrast is where their dynamic starts to work. Deadpool is all mouth. Wolverine is all buried pain. Wade keeps poking, talking, joking, irritating, trying to turn every moment into a bit. Logan, meanwhile, looks like he wants to punch the joke out of him. Sometimes he does. And that physical irritation, that constant bickering, gives the movie its real pulse. Because let's be honest, the plot around them is doing a lot of multiverse gymnastics. Timelines, TVA rules, dead anchors, variants, erasure devices. It can get noisy very fast. But when the movie narrows itself down to these two damaged men trapped together, it becomes much easier to enjoy. Wade needs Wolverine to save his world. Logan does not want to be needed. That's a simple conflict, and it works. There is also something clever about choosing the worst Wolverine. It lets the movie avoid pretending that this is the same emotional version audiences said goodbye to before. At the same time, it still plays with the weight of that legacy. You feel the shadow of the previous Logan hanging over this one, even if the film is constantly cracking jokes around it. And maybe that's why some viewers felt conflicted. Bringing Wolverine back after such a final ending is always going to be tricky. Pointing out how risky it is doesn't completely solve the problem. The movie can joke about it, wink at the audience, and build a whole multiverse excuse around it, but the question still sits there. Did this return need to happen? The answer depends on what you came for. If you came for a sacred continuation of Logan's emotional journey, this probably won't feel deep enough. The reintroduction moves quickly, maybe too quickly, and the movie doesn't always give him enough space before pushing him into another joke or another fight. But if you came to see Hugh Jackman play Wolverine again with real bite, frustration, guilt, and that old physical presence, then the movie gives you plenty to enjoy, because Jackman still has it. Even when the story around him feels thin, he knows how to make Wolverine feel heavy. The posture, the anger, the tired eyes, the way he reacts to Wade's nonsense like every sentence is taking years off his life, it all works. And when the film actually lets him slow down for a serious moment, he brings more weight than the script sometimes earns. That's the strange thing about this Wolverine. He is introduced like a joke, almost like Wade has picked the wrong tool from the multiverse toolbox. But the longer he stays on screen, the more he becomes the emotional counterweight the movie badly needs. Deadpool may be the engine, but Wolverine gives the chaos some gravity. And that's why recruiting the worst Wolverine is not just a gag, it's the movie's smartest character choice. Wade doesn't find the perfect hero. He finds someone as lost as he is, just in a completely different way. One hides pain by never shutting up. The other hides it by shutting everything out. And once the movie puts them together, it finally has something more valuable than multiverse rules or surprise cameos. It has two broken characters annoying each other towards something that almost looks like purpose. Once Deadpool and Wolverine land in the void, the movie basically stops pretending this is just another clean superhero adventure. And honestly, that's where some of its personality starts to show. The void is not some shiny cosmic kingdom or beautiful alien planet with glowing skies and dramatic architecture. It feels more like Marvel's junk drawer. A dusty, damaged, forgotten wasteland where old characters, abandoned ideas, and discarded pieces of superhero history have been tossed aside because nobody knew what else to do with them. Which is kind of funny because that description works both inside the story and outside of it. In the plot, the void is where people and things get sent when they no longer belong. It's a dumping ground for the unwanted, the broken, the inconvenient, the characters who were removed from timelines, forgotten by studios, or left behind by old franchises. And the movie has a lot of fun with that idea. But on a bigger level, the void also feels like a visual version of the movie's entire attitude toward the Fox Marvel era. It's messy, it's nostalgic, it's slightly ridiculous. There are pieces of old superhero history lying around like wreckage after a franchise explosion. Some of it is exciting to see again. Some of it is funny just because it exists. And some of it makes you go, wait, they actually remembered that. That's part of the charm. This place gives the movie permission to become a parade of strange leftovers. Characters who probably would never fit naturally into a normal Marvel story suddenly have a reason to appear, because the void is built for that kind of chaos. It's not elegant, but it is useful. It lets the film turn nostalgia into a location, and that's a clever move, even if it's not always a deep one. The void also has this almost Mad Max kind of wasteland energy. Everything feels sunburned, ruined, and lawless. It's not polished superhero territory. It's more like a desert full of people who have been waiting too long for someone to remember them, and that gives the setting a slightly bitter edge beneath the comedy. Because for all the jokes, there's something a little sad about it. These characters are not just cameos standing in front of the camera for applause. At least in concept, they are people who have been thrown away. They belong to timelines, movies, and franchises that moved on without them. That idea could have been genuinely emotional if the film had stayed with it a little longer. But of course, this is Deadpool. So before anything gets too thoughtful, someone is probably getting stabbed, insulted, or turned into a punchline. Still, the void works because it matches the movie's messy identity. This is a film about characters who don't quite belong anywhere anymore. Wade is rejected from the bigger heroic world. Wolverine is a failed version of a legend. The old Fox Marvel universe is dead, but not fully gone. And the void becomes the place where all of that leftover energy collects. It's not just a setting, it's the movie admitting what it is: a graveyard, a playground, a storage unit full of franchise history. And that mix is exactly why some viewers will love it and others will roll their eyes. If you are already invested in this corner of Marvel history, The Void feels like a reward. Every familiar face, every strange callback, every forgotten piece of the past becomes part of the fun. You're not just watching a story move forward, you're walking through the remains of older stories. But if you are not already attached to that history, The Void can feel hollow. It can start to look less like a world and more like a warehouse of references. The movie is asking you to care because you recognize things, not always because it gives those things new meaning. That's the risk. Recognition is powerful, but it fades quickly if there is nothing underneath it. And The Void sits right on that line. Sometimes it feels like a loving tribute to an era of superhero movies that had its own weird personality. Other times, it feels like the film is dragging out old memories and waving them around for applause. But visually and conceptually, it still gives the movie one of its strongest spaces. Because The Void is where Deadpool and Wolverine stop being just two characters in a multiverse plot and become part of something larger, a farewell tour through Marvel's discarded past. It's chaotic, ugly, funny, overstuffed, and occasionally more interesting than the main story itself, and maybe that's why it fits so well. Deadpool and Wolverine is not a neat movie. It is not clean. It is not carefully balanced. It is full of scraps, callbacks, jokes, violence, and emotional leftovers from better and worse movies before it. So of course, its most important location is basically a wasteland full of broken toys. That feels about right. Now for a movie this loud, this crowded, and this obsessed with throwing everything it can at the screen, the villains are in a slightly strange position. They matter, obviously. The story needs them. But they are not really what most people are going to remember when they walk out of Deadpool and Wolverine. The first problem is Mr. Paradox. And I say problem carefully because Matthew McFadden is actually fun in the role. He brings this smug, slippery office politics energy to the character, like the TVA accidentally promoted the wrong guy, and now the entire universe has to suffer through his management style. He's not terrifying, exactly. He's more irritating in a very deliberate way, the kind of man who could end your timeline and still make it sound like company policy. That part works, but as a major threat, Paradox is more of a device than a truly memorable villain. He exists to kick the story into motion. He gives Wade the bad news, explains the timeline disaster, and pushes the plot toward the void. He's useful, but he never feels like the real emotional wall Deadpool and Wolverine have to break through. He's more like the guy who opens the door to the madness. Then we get Cassandra Nova, and Cassandra is definitely more interesting on paper. She has that strange, unsettling quality the movie needs once we reach the void. She's connected to Charles Xavier. She rules over this wasteland of discarded characters. And she has a power set that feels invasive and uncomfortable in a way that stands out from the usual punching and stabbing. The whole fingers in your face thing is weird enough to be memorable. I'll give the movie that. There's something enjoyably eccentric about her too. She's not just standing around delivering generic villain speeches. She has this offbeat, almost playful menace, like she's dangerous but also amused by how dangerous she is. Some viewers clearly enjoyed that. You can see why. In a film stuffed with sarcasm and violence, a villain who feels a little strange and unpredictable at least gives the screen a different flavor. But still, I kept feeling like the movie could have done more with her. That's the recurring issue with the villains here. They're not terrible. They're not ruining the movie. They have moments. But in a story already fighting for space between Deadpool jokes, Wolverine trauma, Fox nostalgia, TVA rules, cameos, action scenes, and multiverse nonsense, the villains sometimes feel like they're waiting for their turn in a movie that keeps getting distracted. Cassandra Nova should feel like a bigger shadow over the story than she does. She controls the void, she has power, she has a creepy presence, and yet the film's real attention is almost always somewhere else. It's on Wade and Logan fighting. It's on the next callback. It's on whatever surprise face might appear next. And because of that, Cassandra becomes part of the ride rather than the force driving it. That's not entirely unusual for a Deadpool movie, to be fair. Deadpool has never really depended on a traditional villain in the same way some superhero films do. His biggest enemy is usually his own mouth, his own damage, or the movie genre itself. So maybe expecting a deep, towering antagonist here is asking for something the film was never designed to deliver. But even with that in mind, there's still a sense that stronger villains could have given the movie more shape. Because when your plot is already thin, the antagonist becomes more important. A great villain can create pressure. They can make the chaos feel focused. They can give the heroes something sharper to push against. Here, Paradox is funny but slight, and Cassandra is memorable in pieces but not fully developed enough to dominate the movie. So the result is mixed. The villains do their jobs. Paradox gives the story its bureaucratic cruelty. Cassandra gives the Void its strange, dangerous center. Both actors understand the tone and lean into it, but neither one fully escapes the feeling that this movie is mostly interested in its heroes, its jokes, and its nostalgia machine. And maybe that's why the villain problem stands out. Deadpool and Wolverine are such a strong pairing that the movie can survive without a great antagonist. Their chemistry, their arguments, their violence, and their emotional baggage carry huge chunks of the film. But surviving is not the same as being complete. A stronger villain might have made the story feel less like a collection of wild moments and more like a real confrontation. As it is, Cassandra Nova and Mr. Paradox are entertaining enough, but they are not the reason this movie works. They are colorful obstacles in a movie that is much more excited about its two leads tearing into each other than about who they eventually have to defeat. And honestly, that tells you a lot about Deadpool and Wolverine. It has villains, it has threats, it has universe-ending stakes, but the real battle is not really Deadpool versus Cassandra or Deadpool versus Paradox. It's Deadpool and Wolverine versus the movie's own chaos. The funny thing about Deadpool and Wolverine is that the plot is both extremely simple and weirdly overcomplicated at the same time. At its core, the story is not hard to understand. Wade's world is dying, he needs Wolverine, they get thrown into the void, they have to fight their way back, and eventually everyone has to deal with the person trying to erase the timeline. That's the basic shape of it, pretty straightforward, but the movie keeps dressing that simple idea in layers of TVA rules, timeline decay, anchor beings, universe numbers, multiverse logic, old Marvel leftovers, and cameo-driven detours until the whole thing starts to feel busier than it actually is. And that's where the problem begins, because this is not really a movie you watch for the elegance of its storytelling. It's not built like a tight action drama where every scene clicks neatly into the next. It's more like a chaotic road trip through Marvel's storage room, where the plot mostly exists to push Deadpool and Wolverine into the next argument, the next fight, the next joke, or the next surprise appearance. That can be fun. A lot of the time it is fun, but it also means the story itself doesn't always feel strong enough to stand on its own. There are moments where you can almost feel the movie saying, "Don't worry too much about the details, just enjoy the ride." And honestly, for a Deadpool film, that approach is not automatically a disaster. This character has always lived on energy, attitude, and the feeling that the movie is one step away from falling apart on purpose. The issue here is that Deadpool and Wolverine sometimes feels like it actually is falling apart, not always on purpose. The earlier Deadpool movies worked partly because they kept things relatively simple. They had crude jokes, violent action, and self-aware humor. Yes, but underneath all that, the stories were easy to follow. You knew what Wade wanted. You knew what hurt him. You knew why the emotional beats mattered, even when the movie was busy making fun of itself. Here, the emotional motivation is there. Wade wants to save his people, but the road toward that motivation gets cluttered. The plot starts to feel less like a story and more like an excuse. An excuse to bring Wolverine back, an excuse to visit the Void, an excuse to bring in familiar faces, an excuse to make jokes about Marvel, Disney, Fox, old superhero movies, and the multiverse itself. Again, some of those excuses lead to great moments, but great moments are not the same thing as a great narrative. That's why the movie can feel so strange structurally. One scene might be genuinely funny. Another might have a solid action beat. Then a cameo appears, the audience reacts, Deadpool makes a reference, someone gets stabbed, and suddenly you realize the actual story has barely moved. It is constantly moving in terms of energy, but not always in terms of dramatic momentum. And that difference matters. A fast movie is not always a well-paced movie. A loud movie is not always an exciting movie. A crowded movie is not always a rich one. Deadpool and Wolverine has so much happening on the surface that it can hide the thinness underneath for a while. You're laughing at a joke, enjoying Reynolds and Jackman snapping at each other, waiting to see who shows up next, and before you know it, the movie has carried you through another stretch without really deepening the story. For some viewers, that will be perfectly fine. They came for the chaos. They came for the team-up. They came for the blood, the insults, the nostalgia, and the feeling of watching two actors clearly having fun with characters people love. But if you want the plot to truly matter, this is where the film may start to disappoint, because the stakes are huge in theory. Entire timelines, whole universes, everyone Wade cares about, the end of existence, basically. But because the movie is so self-aware and so packed with multiverse mechanics, those stakes don't always feel as heavy as they should. It's hard to fear the loss of one universe when the movie keeps reminding you there are endless replacements, endless variants, endless loopholes. That's the multiverse trap. The The more options you create, the harder it becomes to make any one thing feel final, and the movie seems to know this. Deadpool jokes about it. The story mocks its own machinery. But pointing at the weakness doesn't completely erase the weakness. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it just makes you more aware that the movie is leaning on a structure it doesn't fully believe in. There's also the predictability issue. Once Deadpool and Wolverine are forced together, you can pretty much feel where their relationship is going. They hate each other, they fight, they insult each other, they slowly align, and eventually they have to become a team. That is not necessarily bad. Buddy comedies have been built on that formula forever, but because the film is so proud of its meta-attitude, you almost expect it to twist the structure harder than it does. Instead, it mostly follows the path you expect, while loudly joking about the fact that it's following that path. And that is both charming and frustrating. The charm is that the movie doesn't pretend to be more original than it is. The frustration is that self-awareness can only carry you so far. At some point, the story still has to give you something to hold on to besides the fact that it knows it is ridiculous. That's why the plot ends up feeling like one of the weaker pieces of the film, not because it is impossible to follow, not because every idea is bad, but because it is doing too many things without making any one of them feel strong enough. It wants to be a Deadpool sequel, a Wolverine comeback, a Fox Marvel farewell, a multiverse adventure, a buddy comedy, a cameo showcase, and a Marvel industry roast all at once. That is a lot of weight for a story this thin. And yet somehow the movie keeps moving. That's the strange part. Even when the plot is messy, the energy rarely dies. Reynolds and Jackman keep dragging it forward. The jokes keep coming. The action keeps interrupting. The nostalgia keeps popping up. You may not be fully invested in the mechanics of the story, but you're rarely left with nothing to watch. So maybe the fairest way to put it is this: the plot is not the reason Deadpool and Wolverine works. It is the track the roller coaster sits on, sometimes shaky, sometimes badly designed, occasionally confusing, but just stable enough to keep the ride from flying completely off the rails. And for a lot of people, that will be enough. But it does leave you wondering how much stronger this movie could have been if all that energy had been tied to a cleaner, sharper, more emotionally focused story. Because the ingredients are there, the actors are there, the attitude is there. The audience goodwill is definitely there. The movie just doesn't always know what to do with them beyond throwing everything into the blender and hoping the noise feels like momentum. At this point, the multiverse has become one of those ideas that sounds exciting in theory and exhausting in practice. And Deadpool and Wolverine knows that. That's probably why the movie keeps making fun of it. It understands that audiences have heard the words timeline, variant, universe, and reality collapse so many times now that they don't automatically create excitement anymore. A few years ago, the idea of seeing different versions of characters collide felt huge. It felt like the door had been kicked open. Anything could happen. Now, sometimes it feels like anything can happen, so nothing really matters. That's the biggest problem hanging over this movie. Wade's universe is dying. That should feel enormous. His friends, his home, his entire existence, all of it is at risk. On paper, those are massive stakes. But because the movie is operating inside this endless multiverse playground, there's always this little voice in the back of your mind saying, okay, but can't they just find another version, another timeline, another Logan, another solution? And once that thought enters your head, the danger starts losing weight. The movie is not unaware of this. In fact, Deadpool practically says what a lot of viewers are already thinking. He treats the multiverse like a tired franchise gimmick, something that has been stretched so far that it's starting to collapse under its own cleverness. And that self-awareness helps. It gives the film permission to laugh at the problem instead of pretending it doesn't exist. But joking about a weakness is not always the same as fixing it. That's where the movie gets tricky. On one hand, Deadpool's attitude makes the multiverse stuff more tolerable than it might have been in a more serious Marvel film. He doesn't stand there with wide eyes, acting like every bit of timeline jargon is sacred. He cuts through it, he mocks it, he treats cosmic rules like annoying studio notes, and honestly, that makes the whole thing easier to swallow. But on the other hand, the story still depends on the same multiverse mechanics it is laughing at. It still needs variance, it still needs timeline logic, it still needs the TVA. It still needs a reason for Wolverine to return after a farewell that many people thought should have stayed untouched. So the film is stuck in this strange position, where it is criticizing the machine while happily using every button on it. That can be funny, sure. It can also feel a little hollow. Because when every death can be softened by another version of the character, when every ending can be reopened, and when every old face can return through some cosmic loophole, consequence becomes harder to feel. Superhero movies already struggle with permanence. The multiverse makes that problem even louder. and Deadpool and Wolverine runs straight into it. The film wants you to care about Wade saving his universe. And to be fair, there is a personal angle there that works better than the larger cosmic threat. Wade is not fighting for some abstract timeline number. He is fighting for the people who still matter to him, his friends, his messy little found family. The life he thinks he has failed, that part gives the story some emotional grounding, but the larger multiverse framework keeps trying to pull the movie away from that simple emotional core. Every time the story starts to feel personal, another rule or reference or alternate version steps in and reminds you that this universe is just one piece of a much bigger franchise puzzle. And that is where fatigue sets in. Not because the movie is boring, it is rarely boring. There is too much noise, too much movement, too much joking, too much fighting for it to feel slow. The fatigue comes from the feeling that these stories have become so flexible that they can bend around any consequence. Death is not always death. Goodbye is not always goodbye. Finality is just another thing waiting to be rewritten. That makes it harder to emotionally invest. It also makes Wolverine's return complicated. Everyone wants to see Hugh Jackman again. Of course they do. The man is tied to the character in a way few actors ever are. But the moment he comes back, the movie has to deal with the shadow of Logan. That film worked because it felt final. It had weight because it closed a door. The multiverse opens that door again. And yes, the movie explains it. Yes, it uses a different version. Yes, Deadpool jokes about the whole thing. But somewhere underneath the fun, you can still feel the cost of reopening a story that once had an ending. That is the bargain this movie makes. It gives you the thrill of return, but it weakens the feeling of goodbye. For some viewers, that trade is absolutely worth it. They get Deadpool and Wolverine together, finally, in a loud R-rated action comedy full of blood, insults, and fan service madness. That is enough, maybe more than enough. For others, it becomes another reminder that Marvel has become too comfortable undoing its own emotional impact. And that's why the multiverse fatigue matters so much here. It is not just a complaint about confusing timelines. It is a complaint about meaning. If every character can return, if every universe can be replaced, if every ending can be adjusted, then what are we supposed to hold on to? The movie's best answer is Wade himself, not the TVA. Not the anchor being rules, not the universe numbers. Wade, his refusal to abandon the people he loves, is the one thing that keeps the stakes from becoming completely weightless. He may be surrounded by infinite versions of everything, but to him, his world is still the only one that matters. That is the emotional idea the film should cling to harder. Because when Deadpool and Wolverine focuses on that, the multiverse becomes more than a gimmick. It becomes a threat to the one thing Wade still has, the messy, imperfect life he didn't realize he wanted to protect. But when the movie gets too lost in variants, cameos, references, and cosmic loopholes, the fatigue creeps back in, and you start to feel the larger problem with this era of superhero storytelling. The multiverse can make a movie feel bigger, but if it is not handled carefully, it can also make everything feel strangely smaller. One of the smarter things Deadpool and Wolverine does is admit, almost immediately, that the multiverse has become ridiculous. And not in a quiet way. Deadpool doesn't walk into this movie treating timelines and variants like sacred mythology. He treats them like a corporate headache, like another overcomplicated Marvel problem that someone in a boardroom decided needed 5 explanations, 3 timelines, and a glowing machine in the corner. That attitude is probably the reason the multiverse stuff works here more than it should, because Wade is not impressed by any of it. He hears about dying timelines, alternate Logans, TVA rules, and universe-ending stakes, and instead of acting overwhelmed, he basically reacts like the audience member who has already sat through too many of these stories. He knows the formula, he knows the trick. He knows that the moment you introduce infinite versions of everything, the emotional math starts getting messy, so he makes fun of it, and that is where the movie finds some breathing room. It doesn't completely solve the problem, but it helps. If this had been played as another deadly serious multiverse epic, it could have been unbearable. The plot is already thin enough, the rules are already shaky enough. But Deadpool's constant needling turns the weakness into part of the joke. He is trapped inside the very franchise machine he keeps insulting. That's the fun of it. He'll use the multiverse when it helps him, but he'll also mock how lazy and convenient it can feel. He'll go searching for a replacement Wolverine, while also acting like the whole idea of replacement Wolverines is insane. He'll fight to save his timeline, but he'll also keep reminding us that Marvel has created a world where timelines can be erased, restored, recycled, or rewritten whenever the story needs it. There is something almost satisfying about hearing a Marvel character say the quiet part out loud, because a lot of viewers have been feeling this for a while. The multiverse was exciting at first. It gave the studio permission to bring back old faces, revive lost versions, connect separate franchises, and create big crowd-pleasing moments. But after a while, that same freedom starts to feel like a trap. If anything can happen, then what actually matters? Deadpool turns that question into comedy. He doesn't sit us down for a lecture. He doesn't make some grand speech about franchise exhaustion. He just keeps poking at the absurdity. And because the character has always been built around breaking the fourth wall, it doesn't feel completely out of place. This is exactly the kind of nonsense he would notice. Of course, Wade Wilson would look at the multiverse and treat it like a joke that has gone on too long. The funny part is, the movie is also part of the problem it is mocking. That's where it gets a little complicated. Deadpool and Wolverine laughs at multiverse storytelling, but it is still packed with multiverse storytelling. It mocks fan service, then serves plenty of it. It makes fun of old characters being dragged back, then drags them back. It rolls its eyes at franchise logic, while depending on franchise logic to exist. And somehow, that contradiction becomes part of the movie's personality. It's not pure satire. It's not standing outside the system throwing stones. It is inside the system, wearing the costume, cashing the check, and cracking jokes while doing exactly the thing it says is silly. That can feel clever. It can also feel a little smug, depending on your mood. But when it works, it really does work. Because Deadpool's mockery gives the audience permission to enjoy the nonsense without fully buying into it. You don't have to pretend the timeline rules are brilliant. You don't have to pretend every cameo is deeply meaningful. You don't have to pretend the multiverse is still fresh. The movie knows it is playing with recycled toys, and Deadpool is the kid who keeps pointing out the scratches. That honesty makes the experience lighter. It also protects the movie from collapsing under its own mythology. There are so many moving parts here: the TVA, the Void, Logan's death, anchor beings, dying universes, forgotten Marvel characters, that a more serious film might drown in explanations. Deadpool just cuts through it with sarcasm, not always elegantly, but usually with enough speed that the movie keeps moving. Still, there's a limit. Self-awareness can be entertaining, but it cannot replace storytelling forever. At some point, the movie still needs stakes. It still needs character. It still needs the audience to care about something beyond the fact that it knows it is ridiculous. Deadpool making fun of the multiverse is funny, but if that's all there is, then the joke starts eating the movie from the inside. And occasionally you can feel that happening. There are moments where the film seems more interested in commenting on Marvel's current problems than escaping them. It points at the mess, laughs at the mess, jumps into the mess, and then asks us to cheer because at least it was honest about the mess. That works for a while, maybe even most of the time. But the best moments are when the mockery connects back to Wade himself, because underneath all the jokes, he is still trying to save his world. That's what keeps the multiverse commentary from becoming completely empty. Wade may think the whole system is stupid, but his people are not stupid to him. His timeline matters because they are in it, and that's the key. Deadpool can mock the multiverse all he wants. He can insult the rules, the timelines, the studio logic, the cameos, the recycled stories, all of it. But the movie only has weight when his sarcasm bumps into something real. That tension is what makes this angle interesting. He is laughing at the idea that any universe matters. Then he spends the whole movie proving that one does. There's a strange feeling running underneath Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's not just nostalgia. It's exhaustion, not from the movie itself, necessarily. The film is too loud, too fast, too busy to feel sleepy. But there's this bigger fatigue sitting behind it, like the whole Marvel multiverse has been stretched so far that even Deadpool, the character designed to survive nonsense, looks at it and goes, yeah, maybe this has gone too far. And honestly, that might be one of the more interesting things about the movie. Because somewhere between the TVA, the dying timelines, the alternate Wolverines, the Void, the cameos, the callbacks, the references, and the constant reminders of old superhero history, you start to feel that the film is not just playing with the multiverse. It is also quietly begging someone to clean it up, maybe even burn it down. That sounds dramatic, but the movie itself kind of invites that thought. Deadpool walks through this entire franchise machine with a match in his hand. He makes fun of the rules. He laughs at the loopholes. He treats Marvel's grand timeline logic like an overcomplicated mess that everyone has agreed to take seriously for too long. And after a while, you start wondering if the next Deadpool movie shouldn't be about saving the multiverse. Maybe it should be about ending it, because the multiverse, at this point, has become both Marvel's biggest toy and its biggest problem. It allows anything. Any character can return. Any actor can appear. Any death can be sidestepped. Any ending can be reopened. That is exciting in short bursts, especially when the surprise lands and the audience reacts. But when that becomes the foundation of everything, the stories begin to lose their bite. Deadpool sees that, or at least the movie lets him act like he sees that, and that's why the idea of him tearing the whole thing down feels weirdly appealing. Not because the cameos aren't fun, some of them are very fun, not because Hugh Jackman coming back has no thrill, of course it does. The audience wanted this pairing for years, and the movie knows exactly how to use that anticipation. But underneath the fun, there's a nagging question. How long can Marvel keep doing this before the whole thing stops feeling like storytelling and starts feeling like inventory management? That's where Deadpool and Wolverine becomes more than just a team-up comedy. It starts to feel like a loud, chaotic symptom of where the franchise currently is. It has energy, no doubt. It has personality. It has two leads who can carry entire scenes just by insulting each other. But it also has this feeling that Marvel is standing in a room full of its own history, pulling things off the shelf and hoping recognition will feel the same as emotion. Sometimes it does, sometimes it really doesn't. And Deadpool is the perfect character to call that out because he has no respect for the furniture. He doesn't care if something is supposed to be sacred. He'll make a joke about it. He'll point at the wires. He'll look straight through the camera and remind you that all of this is constructed, marketed, branded, packaged, and sold. That's why the fantasy of Deadpool burning down Marvel headquarters feels so fitting within the spirit of these reviews. It's not just about destruction, it's about release, about cutting through years of tangled timelines and starting again with stories that can actually breathe. The irony, of course, is that this movie also depends on the exact thing it seems tired of. It uses the multiverse to bring Wolverine back. It uses the multiverse to gather old faces. It uses the multiverse to turn forgotten movies into punchlines and emotional callbacks. So it is not exactly standing outside the building criticizing it. It is very much inside the building, enjoying the air conditioning, while making jokes about how ugly the wallpaper is. That contradiction is part of the fun. But it is also part of the frustration, because if even a Deadpool movie can look at the multiverse and say, this is getting ridiculous, then maybe the audience is ready for something cleaner, something smaller, something with consequences again. A superhero story where death means something, where one version of a character is enough, where the emotional hook is not buried under 10 layers of franchise history. That doesn't mean throwing away everything people love. It means remembering why they loved it in the first place. The strongest parts of Deadpool and Wolverine are not the timeline mechanics. They are not the universe labels. They are not the explanations about why reality is collapsing. The strongest parts are Wade trying to protect the people who still matter to him, and Logan carrying guilt he can barely speak about. That's the stuff that sticks. That's the human material. Everything else is noise unless it supports that. And there is a lot of noise here. Fun noise sometimes, expensive noise, crowd-pleasing noise, but noise all the same. So when the movie makes you imagine Deadpool as the one character reckless enough to end the multiverse era, it almost feels like the most honest direction this whole thing could take. Let him walk into the machinery. Let him mock every sacred timeline, every replacement version, every convenient resurrection, every corporate callback. Let him say what everyone is thinking and then do something about it. Because maybe Marvel doesn't need another bigger multiverse threat. Maybe it needs someone dumb enough, funny enough, and disrespectful enough to pull the plug. And if that person happens to be Wade Wilson, honestly, that feels about right. He started this movie as a guy whose life had become too small. By the end of it, you almost want him to look at the entire Marvel universe and decide it has become too big for its own good. One of the weirdest things about Deadpool and Wolverine is that, beneath all the blood, insults, cameos, and multiverse nonsense, it is kind of a goodbye movie. A very loud goodbye. Not the graceful kind where everyone sits around quietly reflecting on what came before. No, this is more like a farewell party where somebody knocks over the table. The music is too loud. Half the guests are people you forgot existed, and Deadpool is in the corner making inappropriate jokes during the emotional speech. But still, it is a farewell. The movie is clearly looking back at the Fox Marvel era with a strange mix of affection, sarcasm, embarrassment, and genuine sentiment. And honestly, that mix feels pretty accurate. That whole era had great moments, awkward moments, forgotten experiments, characters who deserved better, and choices that fans still argue about. So it makes sense that Deadpool, of all characters, would be the one to walk through that history and treat it like both a museum and a crime scene. That's part of what makes the film interesting. It is not just using old Marvel history for cheap applause, although yes, sometimes it absolutely is doing that. It is also acknowledging that these older movies mattered to people. Maybe not all of them, maybe not equally. Maybe some of them are remembered more as jokes than classics, but they still formed a whole corner of superhero cinema before everything became absorbed into one massive Marvel machine. And this movie knows that. The Void basically becomes the perfect place for that kind of tribute. It is not just a random wasteland. It feels like a dumping ground for characters and franchises that were pushed aside when the bigger Marvel universe moved on. Old faces, old costumes, old references, old jokes, they all come back like ghosts from a previous era. Some of them arrive for fun, some of them arrive for nostalgia. And some of them feel like the movie is saying, yeah, we remember this too. That is where the love letter side of the film comes in. For viewers who grew up with those older Marvel movies, or even just watched them across the years, there is a certain pleasure in seeing the film dig through that history. It's messy, but it has warmth. You can feel the affection behind the chaos. The movie may laugh at these characters and the films they came from, but it does not seem to hate them. That's important. Deadpool can be cruel with jokes, but the film itself often feels oddly grateful. It understands that before the MCU became this giant, polished, interconnected machine, there were other Marvel movies trying things in their own uneven ways. Some worked beautifully, some did not, some became beloved, some were left behind, and Deadpool and Wolverine gathers pieces of that past and gives them one last burst of attention. Not always depth, maybe, but attention. And for a movie this unserious on the surface, there is something surprisingly emotional about that, especially when the end credit material leans into old footage and behind-the-scenes memories. That part feels less like a punchline and more like a final wave goodbye. After spending the whole movie making fun of the Fox Marvel world, the film suddenly pauses just long enough to remind you that real people made those movies, real audiences cared about them, and for a certain generation, they were a major part of superhero culture. That shift could have felt cheap. Somehow, it mostly works. Maybe because the movie has spent so much time being rude that, when it finally shows a little sincerity, it catches you off guard. You don't expect this much affection from a film that just spent 2 hours turning superhero history into a blood-soaked joke. But that is Deadpool's whole emotional trick, isn't it? Hide the feeling under noise, then let it slip out for a second before anyone can accuse him of caring too much. Still, the tribute is not clean, and that is where the movie becomes divisive. For some viewers, this is a beautiful goodbye to a strange, inconsistent, but meaningful era. For others, it feels like the film is parading old characters around because recognition is easier than storytelling. Both reactions make sense. Because the movie really is doing both. It is honoring the past, and it is using the past. Sometimes the cameos feel like genuine celebration. Other times, they feel like the film is dragging out the remains of older movies and turning them into little applause buttons. You see a familiar face, the audience reacts, Deadpool says something, and then the movie moves on. That can be exciting in the moment, but afterward, you may wonder how much of it actually mattered. That is the danger of nostalgia. It can feel emotional even when the story has not done much work to earn it. But even with that criticism, I do think the Fox Marvel farewell angle gives the movie a stronger identity than the plot itself. The actual timeline story is thin, the villain conflict is functional, the multiverse rules are shaky, but the feeling of saying goodbye to this old superhero world gives the film texture. It gives the chaos a reason to exist beyond just look who showed up. The movie feels like it knows it is closing a door, not gently, not perfectly, not with the elegance of something like a serious final chapter. But in its own messy Deadpool way, it is trying to throw one last celebration for characters, actors, and movies that no longer really have a home. That is why the title pairing matters too. Deadpool and Wolverine are not just two popular characters finally sharing the screen properly. They are two survivors from that older Fox world being pulled into the Disney Marvel machine. Wade brings the jokes, Logan brings the weight. Together, they become a kind of bridge between what Marvel used to be and what it is now, and the movie keeps poking at that transition. Deadpool welcoming Wolverine into Disney's MCU is funny because it says the quiet thing openly. This is not just a story event, it is a corporate event, a brand event, a merger turned into a buddy comedy with claws and dirty jokes. The film knows that, and rather than hide it, it turns the whole thing into part of the gag. That level of honesty is refreshing, even when it feels a little smug, because the movie is not pretending this is pure, untouched art. It knows it exists because franchises changed hands, audiences wanted this team-up, and Marvel needed a big shot of energy. But it also seems to know that within all of that corporate machinery, there is still room for real affection. That is the strange balance, a corporate product pretending to mock corporate products. A nostalgia machine laughing at nostalgia machines. A goodbye movie that spends half its time insulting the thing it is saying goodbye to. And somehow, that feels exactly right for Deadpool, because a clean, respectful tribute would probably feel fake here. This character would never walk through superhero history with a soft voice and a candle. He would kick the door open, make fun of the costumes, insult the timeline, stab someone, and then, when nobody is looking, admit that maybe all of this meant something after all. That's what Deadpool and Wolverine does at its best. It turns the Fox Marvel era into one last chaotic ride, not a perfect tribute, not a deep historical reflection. More like a messy scrapbook covered in blood, stickers, swear words, and surprisingly sincere notes in the margins. And maybe that is why the farewell lands for a lot of people, because the old Fox Marvel world was never perfect either. It was uneven, it was strange, it had highs and lows, it gave us characters people loved, and it made choices people still complain about, so a polished, perfectly respectful goodbye might not have fit. A loud, rude, sentimental, overstuffed Deadpool movie might actually be the more honest ending. The film laughs at the past, it sells the past, it exploits the past, but it also thanks the past. And by the time those old memories start rolling through the credits, you can feel the movie quietly stepping away from the joke for just a moment. Not long enough to become sentimental in a boring way. Just long enough to let the audience feel that something has ended. Then, of course, Deadpool probably ruins the mood. But honestly, that's the only way this goodbye could have worked. This is where Deadpool and Wolverine gets a little complicated. Because on one level, the nostalgia works. I can't sit here and pretend there isn't a real thrill in seeing the movie dig through old Marvel history, pull out familiar faces, and give certain characters one more strange little moment in the spotlight. There are reveals here that are clearly designed to make a theater react, and when they land, they land. You can feel the audience wake up. You can feel people nudging each other, laughing, whispering, maybe even getting weirdly emotional for something they didn't expect to care about. That's the power of nostalgia. It doesn't always need a full explanation. Sometimes all it takes is a costume, a face, a musical cue, or a reference to something you watched years ago, and suddenly the movie is not just playing on the screen. It's playing with your memory of the screen, and Deadpool and Wolverine knows exactly how valuable that is, maybe a little too well, because the more the movie leans into old Marvel history, the more you start asking the uncomfortable question. Is this an emotional tribute, or is this just corporate fan service dressed up as affection? And honestly, the answer is probably both. There are moments where the film feels genuinely grateful toward the past. It remembers actors, characters, and versions of Marvel that could have easily been buried under the newer MCU machine. It gives some of them dignity. Not always a lot, but enough to suggest that the filmmakers know these older films mattered to certain fans. That part feels sincere, but then there are other moments where the nostalgia feels more like a transaction. The movie shows you something recognizable, waits for the reaction, drops a joke, and moves on. It's fun, sure, but it can also feel a little mechanical, like the film knows exactly which buttons to press and when to press them, and that's the risk with this kind of storytelling. Recognition is not the same thing as emotion. Just because we remember something doesn't automatically mean the movie has done meaningful work with it. Sometimes a cameo can deepen the story. Sometimes it can add history, texture, and a sense of closure. But sometimes it's just there to make people point at the screen and say, "Oh, I know that one." And Deadpool and Wolverine dances right on that line for almost its entire runtime. There's a version of this movie that feels like a love letter. Messy, rude, blood-soaked, completely inappropriate, but still a love letter. It looks back at the Fox Marvel era with a kind of chaotic affection, as if it's saying, yeah, this whole thing was uneven, but it was ours. That version of the movie is easy to enjoy. But there's also another version sitting inside it. That version feels more like a studio realizing old memories can be turned into ticket sales. Bring back the faces, bring back the jokes, bring back the half-forgotten characters. Turn the internet's favorite complaints into punchlines. Turn the audience's nostalgia into currency. And that version is harder to ignore. The strange thing is, Deadpool is the perfect character to get away with it. Because he can call out the cheapness while participating in it. He can make a joke about corporate decisions, franchise recycling, and fan service, and then the movie can immediately give us more of the exact thing he just mocked. That's clever, it's also a little slippery. Self-awareness gives the film protection, but it doesn't fully excuse everything. Just because a movie admits it is manipulating your nostalgia doesn't mean it stops manipulating your nostalgia. Sometimes it makes the manipulation more enjoyable, sometimes it makes it more obvious, and depending on the viewer, that can be either hilarious or exhausting. For longtime fans, the callbacks can feel like a reward. You sat through the strange experiments, the failed spin-offs, the uneven sequels, the characters who never got their due, and now here's a movie that remembers all of it. Not with complete seriousness, obviously, but with enough affection to make the chaos feel celebratory. For someone less invested, though, it may feel hollow. If you don't have that built-in attachment, a lot of these moments become strangely weightless. A character appears, the movie expects a reaction, and if you don't have the memory attached to them, there isn't always much else there. That's where the film's emotional strategy becomes fragile. It depends heavily on what the audience brings into the theater. If you bring years of Marvel memories, the movie has plenty to play with. If you bring only casual interest, some of the biggest moments may feel like inside jokes you weren't invited into. And if you're already tired of franchise filmmaking feeding off its own past, this might feel less like celebration and more like proof that Hollywood has become obsessed with digging through old boxes. Still, I don't think the nostalgia is empty all the way through. There is genuine care here. You can feel it in the way certain old pieces of Marvel history are framed. You can feel it in the goodbye energy. You can feel it when the movie briefly stops smirking and lets the past have a little warmth. Those moments matter because they remind us that behind all the corporate machinery, there were artists, actors, audiences, and memories attached to these characters. But the film rarely lets that feeling sit for long. It gets nervous around sincerity, so it undercuts the emotion with jokes, violence, or another reference. That's very Deadpool, of course, but it also means the tribute sometimes feels like it's afraid to fully commit to itself. And maybe that's the most honest thing about the movie. It wants to laugh at nostalgia and live inside it at the same time. It wants to make fun of fan service while delivering fan service by the truckload. It wants to say goodbye to the past, but it also wants to squeeze every last cheer out of it before the door closes. That contradiction is not a flaw you can easily separate from the film. It is the film, so does the nostalgia work? In the moment, yes, often. Afterward, it's messier. Some of it stays with you because it feels like a real tribute. Some of it fades because surprise is a one-time effect. Once you know who appears, once the theater reaction is gone, once the shock wears off, you're left asking whether those moments had emotional weight or just marketing value. And the answer changes from scene to scene. That's why Deadpool and Wolverine is so interesting as a piece of modern superhero entertainment. It gives fans a lot of what they want, but it also exposes how dangerous that can be. If a movie becomes too dependent on old memories, it risks forgetting to create new ones. And that, more than anything, is the tension at the center of its nostalgia. The past is fun to revisit. But if Marvel keeps living there, eventually even the loudest applause starts to sound a little familiar. Let's be honest, a huge part of the fun in Deadpool and Wolverine is waiting to see who shows up next. That's not even a complaint. It's clearly part of the design. The movie knows exactly what kind of audience it has, and it knows a lot of people are walking in with one question sitting in the back of their mind. Who are they going to bring back? And the film absolutely plays that game, sometimes shamelessly, but also kind of beautifully, because when the cameos work, they really do give the movie that electric theater feeling. You know the one. That moment where a character appears, half the audience reacts before the other half has even processed it, and suddenly the room feels alive in a way you can't really recreate at home. It becomes less like watching a plot unfold and more like being part of a giant shared guessing game. And for a movie this loud and ridiculous, that energy matters. The cameos are not just small decoration here. They are baked into the experience. The movie is built like a roller coaster that keeps turning corners and revealing some new familiar face, some old reference, some strange callback, some character you either expected, hoped for, forgot about, or never thought the movie would actually bother to include. That unpredictability gives the film a lot of its momentum. Even when the story itself is thin, the curiosity keeps pulling you forward. You're not only watching Wade and Logan fight their way through the chaos. You're also watching the movie dig through Marvel history like a kid emptying an old toy box onto the floor. Some toys are broken, some are dusty, some probably should have stayed in the box. But then there's that one piece you see again and suddenly, yeah, you smile. You can't help it, that's the trick. The movie understands that cameos are not just about characters, they're about memory. They bring back the feeling of older films, older versions, older casting choices, and a whole era of superhero cinema that existed before everything became folded into the same massive machine. So when these familiar faces appear, they carry more than a joke. They carry baggage. They carry fan arguments. They carry childhood memories for some people. They carry, in a few cases, the strange satisfaction of seeing something finally acknowledged. And that's why the audience response is so important. Some movies use cameos like empty marketing tools. Here, even when the cameo is clearly there to make people cheer, there's usually at least some sense that the film is enjoying the absurdity with us. Deadpool is the one superhero who can look at a returning actor or a ridiculous callback and basically say what the audience is thinking. He doesn't protect the illusion. He smashes it, points at the pieces, and then somehow makes the mess funnier. That helps the cameos feel less stiff. The film doesn't act like every appearance is sacred. It treats them with affection, but also with a smirk. That is a tricky balance, and not every moment lands equally, but when it does, it gives Deadpool and Wolverine a very specific flavor. It feels like a reunion, a roast, and a farewell tour all happening at once. There's also something fun about how some of the appearances are not just quick waves from the background. A few actually participate in the chaos. They fight. They joke, they help move the adventure along. And that matters because when cameos only exist as freeze-frame surprises, the thrill fades quickly. But when they actually get involved, even briefly, the film feels more generous. It feels like it's not just showing you old characters. It's letting them play one more round. That's where the movie earns a lot of goodwill. Fans have spent years wanting certain characters to return, wanting certain versions to be treated better, wanting old corners of Marvel history to be remembered instead of buried. This film gives them that, maybe not with deep dramatic treatment, but with enough energy and affection that it becomes hard not to enjoy the spectacle. And honestly, some of the surprises are just funny because of how absurd they are. The movie has a way of pulling in names and faces that almost feel like they belong to completely different conversations. Evans, Snipes, Cavill, Favreau, Tatum, the whole thing starts to feel like Marvel history, crashing into a Deadpool joke at full speed. And even if you don't care equally about every appearance, the sheer confidence of the parade is entertaining. It's not subtle, but Deadpool has never been subtle. The cameos also keep the pace alive during sections where the plot might otherwise sag. Because if you strip the movie down to just its narrative structure, there are definitely stretches where things are not especially elegant. But then a familiar face appears, the rhythm changes, the audience gets a little jolt, and suddenly the movie has bought itself another burst of energy. That's not always great storytelling, but it is effective showmanship, and Deadpool and Wolverine is very much a showman's movie. It wants the crowd, it wants the laughs, it wants the gasps, the cheers, the "wait, was that really?" moments. It wants people leaving the theater talking about what they saw, who came back, who surprised them, and which reveal got the biggest reaction. In that sense, the cameos are not separate from the movie's identity. They are part of the engine. They turn the film into an event, not just a sequel, not just another superhero comedy, but a big-screen Marvel party where the guest list is half the attraction. And for a lot of viewers, that's going to be enough. They are not coming for a perfectly structured plot or some deep meditation on timelines. They are coming to see Deadpool and Wolverine tear through a playground of Marvel memories, and on that level, the film delivers. There is a joy in watching the movie refuse to be modest. It doesn't give you one or two small nods and call it a day. It keeps going. It keeps stacking surprise on surprise, reference on reference, old face on old face, until the entire thing starts to feel like the most expensive inside joke ever put on screen. That sounds like criticism. Maybe it is, but it's also part of why the movie is so entertaining, because with Deadpool, excess is almost the point. If the film had been careful and restrained with its cameos, it might have felt dishonest. This character doesn't whisper. He kicks the door open, drags half of superhero cinema behind him, and then makes fun of everyone for showing up. And when the cameos are clicking, that approach gives the movie a wild, generous, crowd-pleasing spirit. You can feel the excitement of the filmmakers wanting to give fans a big, ridiculous night at the movies. You can feel the actors having fun. You can feel the audience being invited to celebrate the messy past instead of pretending it never happened. That's why, even with all the fair criticism about fan service, the cameos remain one of the strongest pleasures of the film. They are not all equal. Some are better than others. Some feel more meaningful. Some are just there for a laugh. A few may hit harder if you know the history behind them. A few might go right over casual viewers' heads. But as a theatrical experience, they give the movie its fireworks. They make the room react. And sometimes, especially in a film this chaotic, that reaction is part of the art. Not the whole art, obviously, but part of it. Because Deadpool and Wolverine is not trying to be watched in silence with folded arms. It wants noise. It wants recognition. It wants people laughing, cheering, groaning, and whispering to the person next to them. The cameos feed that feeling better than almost anything else in the film. So yes, the story may be messy. Yes, the nostalgia may be complicated. Yes, some of the appearances probably work better as surprise than as actual drama. But in the moment when the movie pulls back the curtain and lets another familiar face step into the madness, it is hard to deny the rush. That is the cameo magic here. Not deep, not always earned, not always built to last. But for one loud, ridiculous night in a packed theater, absolutely crowd-pleasing. Now, here's the other side of the cameo conversation. Because yes, the surprise appearances in Deadpool and Wolverine can be fun. They can get a theater clapping, laughing, whispering, doing that little collective gasp where half the room suddenly turns into film detectives. That part is real, but after the excitement fades, some of those moments start to feel a little thin. Not all of them, but enough. There are times when the movie seems to believe recognition itself is the payoff. A character appears, the audience remembers them, Deadpool says something sharp or filthy, and then the film moves on. In the moment, it works because your brain is reacting faster than your criticism. You're not thinking about structure. You're thinking, oh wow, they actually brought that person back. But once the shock wears off, you start asking a slightly harsher question. What did that appearance actually add? And that's where Deadpool and Wolverine gets into dangerous territory. Some cameos feel like they belong in the movie's emotional farewell to the Fox Marvel era. Others feel more like expensive Easter eggs placed carefully for audience reaction. They're not always characters. Sometimes they're applause buttons, and applause buttons can be fun, but they don't always make a movie stronger. There's a difference between using the past and just displaying it. When a returning character has a real purpose, even a small one, the nostalgia feels earned. It gives the film history. It makes the world feel connected. It turns memory into story. But when a cameo only exists to make viewers point at the screen, the joy fades much faster. You recognize the face, you smile, maybe you laugh, and then that's it. The movie hasn't really deepened. It has just reminded you of another movie, and that happens more than once here. The strange thing is, Deadpool and Wolverine almost protects itself from this criticism by joking about it. Deadpool's whole personality is built around calling out exactly this kind of franchise behavior. He knows when something is fan service. He knows when the movie is leaning on nostalgia. He knows when the audience is being handed something recognizable because recognition sells. But knowing the trick doesn't completely erase the trick. If anything, it sometimes makes the trick more obvious. That's the slippery thing about this movie's self-awareness. It can mock hollow fan service while still using hollow fan service. It can laugh at corporate nostalgia while turning nostalgia into one of its main attractions. And because Deadpool is the one saying the joke, the film often gets away with it. You laugh because he's funny. You enjoy the moment because the moment is designed well. But later, you might realize the story itself didn't grow much from it. That's why some of the cameos feel oddly weightless. They arrive with a burst of noise, then disappear before the movie has to do anything meaningful with them. They are built for surprise, not memory. And surprise is powerful, but it's also fragile. It only truly works once. The first time, you're excited. The second time, you're just watching the mechanism. And this is especially tricky because the movie is trying to be a farewell. If this is meant to be a goodbye to the older Fox Marvel world, then you want some of these returns to feel like more than a joke. You want a little weight, a little reflection. Maybe not full dramatic speeches, because that would clash with the Deadpool tone, but at least some sense that these characters are being brought back for a reason beyond. Remember this. Sometimes the movie gives you that. Other times it rushes past it, and that's frustrating because the idea is actually strong. The void is full of forgotten characters and discarded superhero history. That setting could have allowed the film to explore what happens to stories when studios move on from them. It could have made the cameos feel like ghosts from abandoned franchises, each carrying a little piece of unfinished business. Instead, the film often settles for the easier pleasure of recognition. Again, not a terrible pleasure, just a limited one. For hardcore fans, those moments may still feel rewarding. If you know the history, if you remember the casting rumors, the failed projects, the old Marvel movies, the online jokes, then the cameos play like a greatest hits collection of weird superhero trivia. There's fun in that. The movie is practically built for viewers who know the lore well enough to catch every wink. But for casual viewers, some of it may feel like standing outside a private joke. A character walks in, the movie pauses for reaction, and if you don't have the background knowledge, there isn't always much else to hold on to. That can make parts of the film feel strangely hollow, like the emotional value is not on the screen but in the audience's memory. And that's a problem modern franchise movies keep running into. They don't just tell stories anymore. They activate memory. They count on viewers bringing years of attachment into the theater, and then they use that attachment as a shortcut. Instead of building a new emotional connection, they borrow an old one. Deadpool and Wolverine does this with more humor than most films, but it still does it. The cameos can be exciting, but they can also expose how thin the main story is. Because if the biggest reactions in the movie come from people showing up rather than from what is actually happening, then the film risks becoming a collection of entrances instead of a fully satisfying narrative. And that's the difference between a great scene and a great reveal. A great reveal makes you cheer. A great scene keeps meaning something after the cheering stops. Some of the cameo moments here definitely get the cheer, no question. But not all of them have that second life. Not all of them stay with you as anything more than, that was cool. And maybe that's enough for a movie like this. Maybe Deadpool and Wolverine is not trying to create lasting emotional weight with every appearance. Maybe it just wants to throw a giant Marvel party, invite every strange guest it can, and let the crowd enjoy the chaos. There's value in that, especially in a theater full of people who want to have fun. But the emptiness is still there. You can enjoy the cameos and still feel the movie is using them as padding. You can laugh at the references and still wish the story had more identity of its own. You can appreciate the farewell energy and still notice that some of these characters are not being honored so much as displayed. That's the complicated truth of this film. It gives fans what they want, but sometimes in the easiest possible way. And by the end, the cameos become a perfect symbol of the whole movie. Loud, entertaining, nostalgic, self-aware, occasionally delightful, but not always as meaningful as they want to appear. They make the theater react, they make the movie feel bigger, but they don't always make it feel deeper. And that, more than anything, is why the cameo magic in Deadpool and Wolverine has a short aftertaste. It hits fast, it gets the laugh, it earns the cheer, and then it disappears into the next joke before you can ask whether there was anything underneath it. At this point, Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool are almost impossible to separate. And I don't mean that in the usual actor owns the role kind of way, although he absolutely does. I mean the character now feels built around Reynolds' exact rhythm. The speed of the jokes, the smug little pauses, the way he can turn a throwaway line into a full personality disorder. It's all so specific to him that imagining someone else in the suit feels weird. Not impossible, maybe, but definitely wrong. In Deadpool and Wolverine, Reynolds is doing the thing he does best, talking too much, pushing the joke too far, undercutting every serious moment before it can fully settle, and somehow making Wade Wilson feel both unbearable and weirdly lovable at the same time. That's always been the trick with Deadpool. He's not supposed to be smooth. He's not supposed to be tasteful. He's supposed to be the guy who ruins the room, then somehow makes you glad he showed up. And Reynolds understands that better than anyone. The performance is loud, obviously. It's vulgar, it's smug. It's packed with side comments, meta jokes, little industry digs, and that constant feeling that Wade knows he's inside a movie and refuses to behave properly because of it. For fans of the character, this is exactly the appeal. Deadpool is not just a superhero with jokes. He is the joke cutting through superhero seriousness. But this is also where the performance becomes a little divisive. Because if you love Reynolds in this mode, the movie gives you a feast. He's firing off lines constantly, mocking Marvel, mocking himself, mocking the plot, mocking the audience's expectations, and basically treating the entire multiverse like an overfunded comedy sketch. There are stretches where he carries the film almost entirely on attitude, but if that rhythm doesn't work for you, I can imagine this being exhausting very quickly. Deadpool is not a character who gently wins you over. He attacks the movie, he attacks silence, he attacks sincerity. He keeps talking until either you laugh or you start wondering if someone can please mute him for 30 seconds. And in this film, Reynolds takes that energy even further because the movie itself is bigger, louder, and more packed than the earlier entries. Sometimes it works beautifully. Sometimes, yeah, he overeggs it. Deadpool and Wolverine is not a quiet film with music underneath it. It's a loud film with music running through its bloodstream. The songs give the violence rhythm. They give the comedy extra bite. They turn some scenes into mini-events. And every now and then, when the movie stops joking long enough to look back at what came before, the music gives the nostalgia a real little sting. Not a deep wound. This is still Deadpool, but enough to feel something. And in a movie this busy, this sarcastic, and this determined to never sit still, that musical energy becomes one of the main reasons the whole thing keeps moving. The soundtrack doesn't fix the thin plot. It doesn't make every cameo meaningful. It doesn't smooth out every tonal bump, but it does make the ride louder, sharper, and more alive. And honestly, for Deadpool and Wolverine, that might be exactly what the playlist was supposed to do. For all the noise in Deadpool and Wolverine, there is actually an emotional movie hiding somewhere underneath. You can feel it trying to get out. It's there in Wade wanting to save the people he loves. It's there in Wolverine carrying the weight of failure. It's there in the idea of old heroes being discarded, forgotten, and left to rot in the void. It's even there in the film's strange goodbye to the Fox Marvel era, where the movie spends 2 hours making fun of the past and then quietly admits that maybe the past meant something after all. So the emotion is not absent, it's just not always fully earned. And that's where the movie gets frustrating because the pieces are good. Wade Wilson, starting from a place of personal failure, works. He's not just saving a timeline because the plot needs him to. He's saving the tiny, messy world where his friends still exist. That gives the stakes a human shape. It's not about saving reality in some vague superhero sense. It's about saving the people who still show up for him, even when he doesn't feel like he deserves it. That's a strong idea, but the movie rarely lets Wade sit with that for too long. Every time something sincere starts to form, Deadpool's mouth jumps in like an emergency alarm. And yes, that is part of the character. Wade uses jokes to avoid pain. He turns emotion into noise before it can touch him too deeply. That makes sense. But the movie itself also seems afraid of sincerity, and that's a different issue. There are moments where you want it to stay quiet just a little longer, not forever. Nobody is asking for Deadpool to become some silent, tragic drama about grief and identity. That would be ridiculous. But sometimes the film gets so nervous around honest emotion that it undercuts the moment before it has fully landed. A joke comes in, a reference appears, a fight starts, a cameo interrupts the rhythm, and suddenly the feeling is gone. Wolverine gets the better end of this, mostly because Hugh Jackman knows how to bring weight even when the script is moving too fast. His version of Logan feels genuinely haunted. This is a man who has failed before, and not in some light comic book way. He carries shame like it's physically sitting on him. When Jackman gets a serious scene, you can feel the movie briefly becoming stronger around him. That's when the emotion works best, because Jackman doesn't play the guilt like decoration. He plays it like something Logan has been trying to drink, fight, and bury for years. And even in a film packed with jokes, his pain still cuts through. There are moments where you remember, very quickly, why Wolverine has lasted so long as a character. It's not just the claws, it's the sadness underneath the claws. The problem is that the movie doesn't always build enough around that sadness. It gives Logan emotional beats, and Jackman sells them, but the structure around him is rushing. His reintroduction is quick, his backstory is delivered in pieces. His guilt matters, but the film is also constantly busy with multiverse business, cameos, action scenes, and Deadpool's commentary. So even when the performance lands, the writing around it can feel thinner than it should. You feel the actor doing the emotional work, more than the story, and Wade has the same issue in a different way. His arc is basically about feeling useless, rejected, and desperate to prove that his life still matters. That is honestly a good Deadpool arc. Beneath all the filth and sarcasm, Wade wants validation. He wants to belong. He wants someone to look at him and say he is not just a joke. But the movie often treats that emotional thread like seasoning instead of the main dish. It reminds us of it when needed, then runs back into the chaos. That's why some of the big heartfelt moments feel a little too sweet, a little too sudden. The movie wants the payoff of emotion without always giving the build-up enough breathing room. It wants us to care deeply about Wade's world, but we spend so much time outside of it, moving through TVA offices, wastelands, old Marvel references, and cameo playgrounds, that his personal stakes can fade into the background. The emotional idea is clear, the emotional weight is uneven, and that matters because the film is trying to have more heart than it first appears. It doesn't just want to be a violent comedy. It wants Wade and Logan to change each other. It wants their brokenness to matter. It wants the old Fox Marvel farewell to feel like more than a joke. It wants the audience to laugh, cheer, and then maybe, unexpectedly, feel a little lump in the throat. Sometimes it gets there. But not consistently. The farewell material is probably the best example. When the movie looks back at the Fox era, there is something genuinely touching about it, not because every old movie was perfect. Some were great, some were messy, some were barely remembered until this film dragged them back into the light. But there's still a sense of history there. A sense that people made those movies, audiences grew up with them, and this strange corner of superhero cinema deserves some kind of goodbye. That feeling lands especially well near the end, when the movie lets the nostalgia become softer. For a moment, the sarcasm drops, not completely because this is still Deadpool, but enough. And when that happens, you can feel the movie's hidden affection. It has spent so much time mocking the past that the little glimpse of gratitude hits harder than expected. That's the kind of emotion the film handles well. Messy, awkward, half-hidden behind jokes, but still real. The character emotion is a bit more uneven. Deadpool and Wolverine's relationship has real potential because both men are damaged in opposite ways. Wade covers pain with noise. Logan covers pain with silence. That contrast should create a strong emotional build, and at times it does. Their fights, arguments, and insults slowly become a strange form of connection. But the movie is often more interested in how funny they are together than how broken they are together. Again, the comedy works, the chemistry works, but you can sense the deeper version of this movie sitting just out of reach. A version where Wade and Logan's emotional wounds are allowed to echo a little more. A version where the jokes still exist, but the pain underneath them has more time to breathe. That version might have been stronger. Maybe less instantly crowd-pleasing, sure, but stronger. The challenge is that Deadpool movies live on contrast. They make you laugh during horrible things. They turn violence into comedy. They hide sincerity under bad taste. When that balance is right, the emotional moments hit harder because you don't see them coming. The first two films understood that contrast pretty well. They could be crude and stupid, then suddenly let something hurt. Here, the scale gets in the way. There is so much franchise machinery around the characters that the emotional beats have to fight for space. The movie is juggling Deadpool's comeback, Wolverine's return, TVA rules, Cassandra Nova, Paradox, The Void, Fox nostalgia, Disney jokes, cameos, and multiverse fatigue. Somewhere inside all that, Wade and Logan are trying to have arcs. They do have arcs, just not always enough room. That's why the emotion can feel familiar rather than fresh. Wade learning that his world matters. Logan learning he can still do something good. Two broken men slowly becoming better because of each other. These are solid ideas, but they are not exactly new, and the movie doesn't always deepen them enough to make them feel newly powerful. Especially with Wolverine, because Logan is sitting right there in the background. That earlier film gave the character such a complete emotional farewell that any new emotional journey has to fight against the memory of a better one. Deadpool and Wolverine knows this, and it jokes around it, but the comparison is hard to avoid. When this movie reaches for Logan's pain, you can feel the shadow of a film that handled that pain with more patience, more silence, and more consequence. That doesn't mean Jackman's scenes fail. They don't, but the movie around him is not always on his level. And with Wade, the emotional material is more slippery because Deadpool himself keeps sabotaging it. That is funny and true to the character, but it also creates a ceiling. If every sincere moment is immediately punctured, then the audience starts expecting the puncture more than the feeling. The movie has to choose when to let the joke win and when to let the emotion survive. It doesn't always choose correctly. Still, I wouldn't say the film is heartless. That criticism feels too easy. There is care here. There is affection for the characters. There is affection for the old Marvel world. There is a real attempt to give Wade and Logan more than just jokes and violence. The movie may be overstuffed, but it is not empty of feeling. It just has trouble trusting that feeling. It keeps hiding it behind noise. Maybe that is why the emotional beats that do land feel almost accidental. A look from Jackman. A pause before Reynolds turns the moment into a joke. A brief flash of Wade realizing he actually cares. A goodbye montage that suddenly feels more sincere than the movie has been willing to admit. Those little moments matter. They remind you that there is a soul somewhere under all the sarcasm. But the film doesn't always dig deep enough to reach it cleanly. So the emotional side of Deadpool and Wolverine is present, but imperfect. It gives the movie enough heart to keep it from becoming pure cameo machinery, but not enough heart to make the story feel fully satisfying on its own. The performances often carry more emotion than the writing. The ideas are stronger than the development. The feelings are real, but sometimes rushed, and maybe that is the most honest way to describe it. The movie wants to care. It just keeps getting distracted by its own party. Still, when it slows down for even a second, when Wade's desperation slips through or Logan's guilt finally has room to breathe, you can see the better movie inside this one. A movie about failure, legacy, found family, and two damaged men trying to prove they still matter. Then Deadpool says something disgusting, the music kicks in, someone gets stabbed, and the moment is gone. That's frustrating. But also somehow very on brand. By the end of Deadpool and Wolverine, I had that strange feeling you get after a movie gives you almost everything it promised, while still leaving you unsure how much of it actually mattered. Because as a night out, this thing works. It's loud, it's rude, it's violent. It has Ryan Reynolds doing the Deadpool thing at full speed, Hugh Jackman returning with all the weight people hoped he would bring, a pile of cameos, some genuinely funny moments, a few strong fights, a soundtrack that keeps the energy up, and enough Marvel history to make longtime fans feel like they're walking through a museum that's been vandalized by Wade Wilson. That's a pretty good pitch, and for a lot of viewers, that's going to be more than enough. You sit down, the movie starts swinging, the theater reacts, Deadpool says something he absolutely should not say, Wolverine looks like he regrets every decision that brought him here, and suddenly you're having fun. Not deep, quiet, reflective fun, more like chaotic theme park fun, the kind where you know the machinery is visible, but the ride is moving fast enough that you don't always care. That's where the movie is strongest. It understands the crowd. It understands that people wanted to see these two characters together properly, not in some half-hearted, restrained, overly polished crossover. They wanted insults, blood, claws, fourth-wall jokes, old Marvel references, and that strange chemistry between Reynolds and Jackman that makes the whole thing feel more alive than the plot probably deserves. And on that level, the movie delivers. The problem is what happens when you step back from the noise. Because once the cheering fades, Deadpool and Wolverine starts to look a little less like a complete film and a little more like a collection of moments. Fun moments, absolutely. Crowd-pleasing moments. Moments people will clip, quote, argue about, and remember because of who appears or what joke lands. But still moments. The actual story underneath all of that is thin. Not impossible to follow. Not completely broken. just not strong enough to carry the weight of everything built on top of it. The movie has universe-ending stakes, but it doesn't always make them feel heavy. It has emotional arcs, but it rushes them. It has villains, but they're not the main attraction. It has nostalgia, but sometimes that nostalgia feels more like a button being pressed than a feeling being earned. And that's the central tension of the whole film. It is very entertaining. It is also kind of hollow. Those two things can exist at the same time. I don't think this is a disaster by any means. Calling it that would feel dishonest because there's too much pleasure in the experience. The leads are too good. The energy is too strong. The movie has too many scenes that work in the moment. Even when it's messy, it's rarely boring, and that counts for something in a superhero landscape where some films have started to feel more like homework than entertainment. But I also don't think it's the miracle cure for Marvel. It gives the MCU a jolt, sure, a loud one, a profitable one, a crowd-pleasing one, but it also exposes the same problems Marvel has been wrestling with for a while now: the dependence on nostalgia, the multiverse loopholes, the fear of letting endings stay ended, the temptation to use recognition as a shortcut for emotion, the feeling that a movie can become so busy reminding you of other stories that it forgets to fully become its own. And Deadpool and Wolverine is self-aware about all of that. That helps, but it doesn't completely fix it. Deadpool can make fun of the multiverse until his voice gives out, but the movie still runs on multiverse fuel. It can mock fan service while delivering fan service by the truckload. It can joke about corporate decision-making while existing as one of the most obvious corporate crossover events imaginable. That contradiction is funny, and the film gets a lot of mileage out of it. But eventually, you do start to wonder if laughing at the problem is enough. For me, the best version of this movie is not the one packed with the most cameos or the most references. It's the smaller movie buried inside the massive one. Wade trying to prove his life matters. Logan trying to crawl out from under his own failure. Two broken characters who cannot stand each other slowly becoming the only people who might understand each other. That's the stuff that gives the movie a heartbeat. Whenever it leans into that, even briefly, it becomes more than a franchise party, but then the film gets distracted again. Another joke, another reference, another action beat, another surprise, another reminder that the Marvel machine is both the target and the engine of the whole thing. And while that keeps the movie fun, it also keeps it from becoming truly great. So the final impression is complicated. As a theater experience, it's a blast. Big screen, loud sound, audience reactions, that is probably the ideal way to watch it. The flaws get softened by the energy in the room. You laugh at the jokes that land, enjoy the violence, smile at the team-up, and let the movie throw its entire toy box at you. As a story, though, it's shakier. It doesn't have the emotional precision of Logan. It doesn't have the tighter simplicity of the earlier Deadpool films. It doesn't fully escape the multiverse fatigue it spends so much time mocking. And it doesn't always turn its nostalgia into something deeper than recognition. But maybe expecting it to do all of that is asking for a different movie, because Deadpool and Wolverine is not trying to be elegant. It's trying to be a party. A messy, bloody, vulgar, self-aware superhero party where the guest list is ridiculous, the host won't shut up, and the emotional speech keeps getting interrupted by violence. If you go in wanting that, there's a good chance you'll have a great time. If you go in wanting a clean, meaningful, carefully built story, you may come out feeling like you ate a full meal and somehow still feel hungry. That's the weird aftertaste. The movie gives you plenty, but not always substance. It gives you energy, but not always depth. It gives you emotion, but not always enough time to feel it. It gives you nostalgia, but sometimes asks nostalgia to do work the writing should have done. And still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't work more often than it fails, because Reynolds and Jackman are just too good together. Because the movie's best jokes do hit, because some of the action is genuinely satisfying, because the Fox Marvel farewell has more warmth than expected, because, for all its corporate machinery, there is real affection under the sarcasm. That's what saves it, not the plot, not the multiverse, not the cameos alone, the affection. You can feel that the people involved wanted this to be fun. They wanted to give fans something loud and satisfying. They wanted to let Hugh Jackman step back into Wolverine with impact. They wanted Deadpool to crash into the MCU without losing his mouth. They wanted to say goodbye to an old era while making fun of it one last time. And even when the movie is shallow, that affection keeps it from feeling completely soulless. So no, Deadpool and Wolverine is not perfect. It's overstuffed, uneven, self-satisfied, sometimes repetitive, and occasionally more interested in being recognized than being felt. But it's also funny, energetic, surprisingly affectionate, and carried by two leads who know exactly why people came to see them. It is not the future Marvel desperately needs. It is more like a loud reminder of the past Marvel keeps returning to, and maybe that's why the ending feeling is so mixed. You enjoy the ride, but you also sense that this kind of ride can't be the whole future. Cameos are fun. Nostalgia is powerful, legacy characters matter, but eventually, Marvel will need new stories, new stakes, and new characters people can love without needing a decade of memory attached to them. Deadpool himself almost seems to know that. He jokes his way through the ruins of old superhero history, dances around the collapse of meaning, and somehow still proves that one little world matters because the people inside it matter to him. That's the best idea in the movie, not the multiverse, not the TVA, not the surprise appearances, just the simple thought that even in a universe full of replacements, some things still can't be replaced. And if Deadpool and Wolverine had trusted that idea a little more, it might have been more than a great time at the movies. It might have been a great movie. As it stands, it's a loud, funny, bloody, nostalgic, messy crowd pleaser with a real heart beating under a mountain of franchise noise. Not great, maybe, but definitely alive. And for Deadpool, that's probably enough to walk away smirking.